Chapter 631. Lu Ping carefully examined the three necklace-like magic treasures in his hand for a long while before saying with some hesitation, "Could this be the demon transforming bracelet?" Lu Ping shook his sleeve again and released De Bao. When De Bao came out and saw the surrounding river water, he felt somewhat uncomfortable. But after seeing the jade water moon pearl floating above Lu Ping's head, he relaxed and asked, "Boss, how is the thing we got from the fifth forbidden ground?" Lu Ping didn't say anything and directly threw the demon transforming bracelet in his hand towards De Bao. De Bao didn't have time to dodge and the silver necklace-like magic treasure was already on his neck. De Bao lowered her head and looked at Lu Ping with a puzzled expression. Suddenly, Lu Ping's eyes glowed with a green light that was more than a foot long. Clearly, he was casting the three pure one's true pupils with all his might. Seeing this, De Bao knew that Lu Ping was most likely testing this necklace-like magic treasure on his body, so he didn't say anything. After a moment, the azure light in Lu Ping's eyes disappeared and a strange expression appeared on his face. He said, "Sure enough, this strange treasure is the demon transforming bracelet." De Bao carefully looked at the demon transforming bracelet on his neck and asked with some apprehension, "Boss, what is the demon transforming bracelet?" Lu Ping waved his hand and the demon transforming bracelet on De Bao's neck reappeared in Lu Ping's hand. He then explained to De Bao, "The demon transforming bracelet is said to be the unique magic treasure of a mysterious sect in the Middle Earth, the Spirit Beast sect. This magic treasure, when worn on the body of a demon, can conceal the demon's foundation and not be detected by human cultivators. It is the most ideal magic treasure for demon cultivators to walk the human cultivation world." De Bao's eyes suddenly lit up. He said, "That's so magical. Boss, can you give this thing to me? In any case, boss, you have 3 demon transformation chakrams." Lu Ping put the demonization bracelet on his wrist and said, "Your sense of smell can be considered a special technique among demon cultivators. Do you think I'm a human or a demon?" De Bao looked at Lu Ping with some astonishment, but he still sniffed around Lu Ping. A strange expression appeared on his face, and he said in surprise, "No way, boss, why do I find that you are no different from a monster race cultivator? Although I can't tell what kind of demon cultivator your demon chi is, you do have demon chi on you." Lu Ping took the demonization bracelet off his wrist and said, "Now you understand. This magic treasure that looks like a necklace and a bracelet is called the demonization bracelet in the human race, and the false demon bracelet in the demon race. It means that humans can pretend to be monster race cultivators if they wear it, and monster race cultivators can pretend to be human race cultivators if they wear it." De Bao immediately understood the value of these 3 magic treasures. Sam Ling and Lu Qiner were both top monster race cultivators. Before they entered the Dharma stage, it was almost certain that Lu Ping would take them to the inheritance grounds of the 2 races to receive the last bloodline inheritance of the 2 races. This demonization bracelet might be of great help to Lu Ping on his trip to the monster race. Looking at these 3 magic treasures, De Bao couldn't help but say in surprise, "This is really too magical. I wonder how the Spirit Beast sect cultivators were able to make such magical treasures." Lu Ping also said with a sigh, "Legend has it that the Spirit Beast sect is a sect that is jointly controlled by the cultivators of both the human and demon races. No one knows whether the Spirit Beast sect cultivators who roam the cultivation world are humans or demons. This is because some of the high-level Spirit Beast sect cultivators wear this kind of necklace magic treasure when they appear in the cultivation world. Because of this, they are afraid of the Spirit Beast sect, which is a sect that combines humans and demons. Therefore, although the Spirit Beast sect cultivators rarely appear in the cultivation world, when they do, very few people are willing to provoke them." Lu Ping carefully placed these 3 magic treasures in his storage ring. Although it had only been 5 days since their trip to the Surplus Heaven sect, Lu Ping and the others had only managed to open 5 of the simplest restrictions despite their best efforts. Lu Ping was already very satisfied with this harvest. Lu Ping followed the flow of the river and was just about to release his divine sense to check where he had arrived. When he looked up, he just happened to see a fishing net suddenly fall from above, covering Lu Ping. Lu Ping was startled, but he immediately realized who was on the surface of the river. He smiled and said, "What a coincidence." Lu Ping casually waved his hand, and about 20 to 30 fish that were swimming past Lu Ping were swept up by Lu Ping. Lu Ping, on the other hand, moved and escaped from the net. When the net was retracted, the 20 to 30 fish had already been dragged up. Suddenly, a young man's surprised voice sounded from the river. "Haha, today's luck is not bad. I'll sell these 10 or so fat ones for money to pay for mother's treatment. The rest of the smaller ones can be eaten by myself." Just as the young man finished speaking, a clear and melodious voice sounded, seemingly dissatisfied. Then, he heard the young man say, "That won't do. You have to eat cooked food in the future, not raw food. Mother said that you have to be a human in the future. You can't always be a demon." A strange look appeared in Lu Ping's eyes, but he did not pay too much attention to it. After all, De Bao had already warned this kid that there should be demons around him, but he did not expect it to be a little demon at the early stage of the blood-refining realm that had yet to mature. Just as Lu Ping was about to return to the rocky cave, he heard a hearty laugh. Lu Ping's expression changed. Then, he heard the young man say happily, "So it's Immortal Kai. This kid pays his respects to the immortal." Then, a voice that Lu Ping had heard on the lone peak of Celestial Mountain was heard. "Little boy from the Du family, it seems that you've had a good harvest today. How is your mother's illness? I heard that 2 days ago, you invited a disciple from our sect to treat your mother. Has there been any improvement in the past 2 days? I dare not hide this from you, immortal." Du Jiaoa hesitated for a moment before replying. "Although my mother's illness has improved, she has not fully recovered." "Oh, there's such a thing?" Immortal Kai's tone was full of surprise. Then, he said angrily, "Whose sect's disciple is this?" Not only did he accept spirit stones from mortals, he actually accepted spirit stones from others and did not complete the task properly. When we return to the sect, he will definitely be punished severely. Du Jiaoa's panicked voice immediately sounded. "Immortal, you can't blame me. It's just that my mother has been suffering from a chronic illness for many years. It's difficult for her to recover." After a while, Immortal Kai's voice sounded again. "Lead the way. I'd like to see what kind of chronic illness it is that even a cultivator can't cure." Du Jiaoa's joyful voice immediately sounded. "Then, thank you very much, Immortal Kai. I will return to the village now. Please wait for a moment." Then, the sound of paddling water could be heard. However, Lu Ping's divine sense was currently locked onto a small creature that didn't dare to move. When Kai Yun flew over, this small creature hid under the boat and didn't dare to show itself. For some reason, Kai Yun didn't notice that there was a monster hiding under the small boat. Lu Ping thought for a moment. Then, he stretched out his hand and cut a hole in the barrier formed by the aquamoon pearls. 3 small snakes, green, blue, and white, suddenly appeared in the surplus river. Lu Ping opened his mouth and said something. The 3 small snakes nodded at Lu Ping, turned around, and disappeared without a trace. Looking in the direction Sam Ling disappeared, Lu Ping seemed a bit worried. He placed a palm-sized turtle into the surplus river. Putting aside the fact that Lu Ping had returned to his cave abode along the river, Du Jiaoa, who was filled with joy, rode towards the Du family village with an even more powerful immortal in his eyes. He didn't notice the strange look in Kai Yun's eyes as he stood at the bow of the boat. The Du family village wasn't small. There were about 1,000 people in the village. Du Jiaoa's father had died a long time ago, so he was raised by his widowed mother. However, Du Jiaoa was born with great strength. By the time he was 10, he was as tall as a 13 or 14-year-old boy, and his strength was no weaker than an adult's. During this time, Du Jiaoa's mother was already suffering from a chronic illness. Thus, the 10-year-old Du Jiaoa began to follow the hunters in the mountains to hunt, and the fishermen to fish in the surplus river. At the same time, he took care of the family's 2 mu of farmland. Because he was born with great strength and was smart, he quickly learned how to hunt and fish. He also took good care of the family's 2 mua farmland. Thus, in just a year, Dujialoa had his own fishing boat. His family's circumstances also improved a lot. The villagers admired him for being able to support his family at such a young age. They affectionately called him Du Lang. When Du Jiao docked his fishing boat at the ferry and returned to the village, many villagers greeted him when they saw him. However, when the crowd saw Kai Yun following behind Du Jiao, all of them became cautious and respectful. It had only been 2 years since the Surplus Heaven's immortal sect started selecting young men of suitable age to open their bloodlines. Back then, Kai Yun had followed his third uncle to the Du clan village to host the ceremony. The mortals in the village all knew that he was an immortal elder of the Surplus Heaven's immortal sect. However, when they heard that Immortal Kai had come to treat Du Jialoa's wife, the villagers all praised the Ying Tian immortal sect's benevolence. However, as Kai Yun followed Du Jialoa back to his home, a grave expression gradually appeared on his face as they approached. In a small farmhouse surrounded by fences, there were 3 wooden houses arranged in a triangular formation. One of the wooden houses looked like it had just been renovated, but its door was tightly shut. Du Jialoa walked into the fenced courtyard and shouted excitedly, "Mother, Immortal Kai from the Ying Tian immortal sect is here. Your illness will definitely be cured this time." After Du Jialoa shouted excitedly, the house in the middle was completely silent. Kai Yun unknowingly stood at the gate of the fenced courtyard. He didn't walk into the courtyard. He looked at the small wooden house in front of him with a gloomy expression. However, he quickly calmed down. A gray talisman had appeared in his half-clenched left hand. Du Jialoa looked doubtfully at the wooden house and shouted, "Mother, are you at home? Immortal Kai from the Ying Tian immortal sect is here. Quickly come out and welcome him." However, the wooden house was still completely silent. Du Jialoa muttered to himself, "Is she not at home? After father passed away, mother's health has always been poor. She rarely goes out." After saying that, Du Jialoa walked to the front of the wooden house and stretched out his hand to push the door open. However, just as Du Jialoa's hand was about to reach the door of the wooden house, the door suddenly opened from the inside. A woman in her 30s, with a delicate figure and an abnormally pale face, swayed as she stood at the door. When Du Jialoa saw the woman appear in front of him, he couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. Then joy appeared on his face as he said, "Mother, so you are at home. Quickly come and see, this is Immortal Kai from the Ying Tian immortal sect. Immortal Kai has just agreed to treat mother's illness." The woman glanced at Kai Yun, who was standing in front of the fence with a smile on his face. She hurriedly walked out of the wooden house and bowed to Kai Yun. She said, "This lowly concubine, Madame Du, greets Immortal Kai. It is my great fortune to have troubled Immortal Kai to treat this lowly concubine's illness." After seeing Du Jialoa's mother leave the wooden house, Kai Yun's expression became much more relaxed. However, he still didn't put away the great talisman in his left hand. He bowed slightly and said, "Healing the wounded and dying is the duty of the Ying Tian immortal sect. Madam, there is no need to be so polite." Inside the wooden house, Kai Yun casually looked at the decorations in the house and asked, intentionally or unintentionally, "May I ask, Madam, is there only Madam and your son living in this family?" Madame Du softly said, "Immortal, my late husband passed away 10 years ago, leaving only the 2 of us to depend on each other." Kai Yun nodded and asked again, "Did Madam interact with anyone in the past? Did you have a good relationship with any family?" Madame Du imperceptibly furrowed her brows and said, "My late husband was very friendly with most of the people in the village. After my late husband passed away, this lowly concubine rarely went out to socialize and had little contact with the other families. After Jiao grew up, he was the one who came to greet the people in the village." A strange look flashed through Kai Yun's eyes. He murmured in a voice that only he could hear, "That's strange." Du Jialoa didn't know why Immortal Kai didn't immediately treat his mother's illness after entering his house. Instead, he asked all sorts of questions and said some things that didn't sound very clear. Thus, he softly asked, "Immortal Kai, how is my mother's illness?" Kai Yun seemed to have a sudden realization and smiled. When I entered your house just now, I discovered some clues. However, I still have to wait for treatment before I can make a conclusion. Du Jialua hurriedly said. In that case, thank you very much, Immortal. Madame Du looked at Kai Yun and slowly placed her wrist flat. Kai Yun extended a finger to touch her meridian. A wave of Fa directly entered Madame Du's blood vessels. Then, it followed the blood vessels and rushed directly to her heart. At the same time, Kai Yun stared closely at Madame Du's expression. However, Madame Du seemed to feel nothing at this moment. Her head was half lowered, but her face seemed to be even paler. Seeing that Kai Yun's Fa was about to enter Madame Du's heart, the surging Fa would definitely burst her heart and cause Madame Du to vomit blood and die. Kai Yun suddenly pulled back his finger and withdrew the Fa that was flowing along the blood vessels to her heart. Then, Kai Yun pointed his finger again. This time, he was seriously feeling Madame Du's meridians. Du Jialua looked at Kai Yun with a hopeful expression. He did not know that in that instant, his mother had already taken a walk through the gates of hell. After a long time, Kai Yun frowned and opened his eyes. He said, Madame's body is weak. It seems to be a congenital illness. If it was a normal person, they wouldn't have lived past the age of 20. However, Madame has survived until now and even got married and had a child. In the eyes of mortals, this is already unbelievable. Madame Du's pale face smiled. Jialua is not my son. He was born to my late husband and his ex-wife. After my late husband passed away, I raised Jialua. Jialua is only 12 years old. Now Jialua is raising this lowly concubine. Kai Yun looked at Du Jialua in shock. Du Jialua asked anxiously, Immortal, is my mother's illness really that serious? Is there a way to cure it? Kai Yun could see that Du Jialua did not care if he was Madame Du's biological son. It was obvious that he already knew about this. However, when he thought of the Du family's system, Kai Yun could not help but frown. A congenital illness like this was not incurable in the cultivation world. However, if one wanted to completely cure it, they would have to consume some natural treasures. It was not that the surplus river sect did not have such things, but it was not worth it to waste such treasures on an ordinary mortal woman. Kai Yun had originally scoffed at the method his third uncle had suggested. Since they were going to abduct someone's child, why would they take care of his parents? Wasn't this the same as being a prostitute and having a chastity memorial? From Kai Yun's point of view, they should just kill the entire family and bring Du Jialua back to the sect. No one would seek revenge in the future. After all, they were just a family of mortals. Thinking of this, Kai Yun's body unknowingly carried a trace of murderous intent. The Du clan seemed to be unaware of it, but Du Jialua, who had been hunting in the mountains all year round, suddenly felt as if his skin was being pricked by needles. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment. He never expected that this highly respected immortal before him would actually want to silence his mother. In the end, Kai Yun still suppressed this thought in his heart. He did not dare to directly disobey the orders of his third uncle, the alchemy master of the Yinghe sect. After pondering for a moment, he took out a jade bottle from the storage bag at his waist and handed it to Du Jialua reluctantly. He said, This is a secret elixir of our sect. With this bottle of elixir, even if your mother's illness cannot be cured, it will not endanger her life. If this bottle of elixir is used on a mortal like your mother, it can extend her life by at least 30 years. It will be enough for her to die of old age. Although Du Jialua was slightly regretful that he could not cure his mother's illness, he was ecstatic to be able to obtain a bottle of elixir that could extend his mother's life. Du Jialua thanked Immortal Kai repeatedly. Immortal Kai seemed to enjoy the feeling of being worshipped. When he saw that Du Jialua was almost done bowing, he waved his hand and released a ball of magic power to stop him from bowing. Just as he was about to say something, his expression suddenly changed. He said, Old man was right. There is indeed a demon hidden here. As soon as Kai Yun finished speaking, he disappeared from the wooden house. A shrill scream suddenly rang out from outside the door. Then, Kai Yun shouted angrily in an imposing manner, What a demon! How dare you appear in the territory under the jurisdiction of the Inghi sect? The Du clan lady's illness must be related to you. Why are you still not surrendering? Do you want me to kill you directly? Du Jialuo's expression changed when he heard this. He looked at his stepmother pleadingly. However, at some point, the Du clan lady's pale face had turned deathly pale. Her eyes had turned blood red and she suddenly let out a low growl. Chapter 632. Du Jialuo turned pale with fright and said anxiously, "Mother!" However, it was as if the Du clan did not hear Du Jialuo's advice. A white shadow flashed in front of Du Jialuo, and a loud sound came from behind him. When Du Jialuo looked over, the Du clan was no longer in front of him, and the wall behind him had been smashed open by the Du clan. Kai Yun's cry of surprise came from outside the house. However, before the cry could fade, it turned into a scream of shock and anger. When Du Jialuo heard this, he hurriedly ran out of the house, only to see that the fence surrounding the courtyard had already been torn to pieces. Two figures, one gray and one white, were chasing each other in the air. Every time the two figures passed each other in the air, a series of explosive sounds would be heard. The aftershock from the battle between the two caused Du Jialuo's skin to hurt. If not for the fact that his body was different from an ordinary person's, he would have been affected by the aftershock of the battle between cultivators. Even so, Du Jialuo did not dare to stay nearby for long. However, he did not leave the center of the battle. Instead, he looked around, as if he was looking for something. At that moment, his eyes lit up, and he scrambled over to the periphery of the battle. Then, he picked up a foot-long silver-white fox from a vegetable garden in the courtyard. At this moment, Kai Yun's scream came from the sky again. When Du Jialuo looked up, he saw a gray figure pierce through the ground from the sky, and a rain of blood fell from the sky. The white figure landed on the ground. It was Du Jialuo's stepmother, the Du clan. Kai Yun lay on the ground, and the 5 wounds on his left ribs had already stopped bleeding. It was likely that the Du clan had left behind when she had charged out of the wooden house to launch a surprise attack. At this moment, his right shoulder had become a bloody mess, and half of his body was covered in blood. Seeing the Du clan walk towards him with blood-red eyes, Kai Yun's face was filled with panic and fear. He shouted in shock, You're not a human clan cultivator! You're definitely not a human clan cultivator!" As he spoke, a gray light suddenly rose from his hand. Du Shi's expression changed, and her right hand formed a claw as if she wanted to extinguish the light. However, the gray light disappeared in a flash, and Du Shi's right hand's fingernail extended 3 inches out of thin air, directly piercing into Kai Yun's core space. Kai Yun knew that he did not have long to live, and the fear on his face instantly disappeared. Before he died, he howled miserably. "Evildoer, I have already sent out a talisman to ask for help. Just wait for the surplus river sect to kill you!" Madame Du's originally pale face instantly turned ashen, and she could no longer hold back the mouthful of blood. When Du Jialuo saw that the Du lady was on the verge of collapse, he immediately cried out in alarm. "Mother!" When Madame Du saw Lu Ping running over with the little fox in his arms, an ugly smile appeared on her face. The redness in her eyes faded as she reached out to grab Kai Yun's storage bag. She said, "Good child, we can't stay here any longer. Let's leave quickly. The cultivators from the Abundant River sect are about to arrive." Du Jialuo nodded and said with a pained expression, "Mother, let's leave immediately. This time, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have brought these immortals to our house." Madame Du rubbed Du Jialuo's head and said, "Child, this is not your fault. You were doing this for my own good. Initially, this surplus river sect cultivator with the surname Kai could not tell that the bottle of elixirs he took out was indeed effective for your internal injuries. Madame Du chose 2 types of elixirs from Kai Yun's storage bag and consumed them. When she saw that Du Jialuo was about to return home to pack up, she hurriedly spat out a mouthful of blood into the grass. She laughed bitterly and stopped Du Jialuo. She said, "Luoer, it's more important to escape now. We can't care so much anymore. Du Giallo immediately came to a realization. He was still hugging the little fox tightly in his arms, but his expression was somewhat confused. He asked, "Mother, where are we going?" Madame Du sighed inwardly. "After all, he's only a 12-year-old child." Madame Du glanced at the silver little fox in Du Giallo's arms, and a loving expression appeared on her face. She said, "Let's leave the village first. The battle with that surplus river sect cultivator just now caused quite a commotion. The villagers are probably scared out of their wits." Du Giallo nodded. When Immortal Kai called him a demon, Du Giallo knew that his family could no longer establish a foothold in the village. Moreover, his adoptive mother had killed an immortal from the surplus river sect. 2 people and 1 fox left the village. Madame Du took out a silk handkerchief from her sleeve and shook it in the wind. The silk handkerchief immediately turned into a 3-meter-long flying carpet. Du Giallo looked at Madame Du in shock. Madame Du said in a low voice, "Luor, hurry up and go up. The surplus river sect cultivators are probably rushing over now." Du Giallo hugged the little fox and got on the flying carpet. Madame Du laboriously made a few hand seals behind him. A trace of blood appeared at the corner of her mouth again, and the silk handkerchief immediately flew towards the northeast. Less than 10 minutes after Madame Du's family left, a long howl that contained unparalleled anger surged over. Before the howl could stop, a beam of light had already smashed into the entrance of the Du family village. There was a loud bang, and the entire Du family village seemed to shake. The surplus river sect's alchemy master, Kai Yun's third uncle, stepped into the village and arrived at the fences of the Du family village and the Luo family village. Master Kai's expression was frighteningly gloomy as he looked at Kai Yun's corpse on the ground, whose heart had been ripped out. An invisible pressure spread out from Master Kai to the surroundings of the Du family village. The village was instantly in chaos. Many villagers in their houses knelt in the direction of Master Kai. The 3 wooden houses behind Master Kai collapsed, and the fences outside the courtyard flew in all directions. At this moment, a few beams of light appeared in the sky again. After they landed, a few surplus river sect cultivators rushed over. Master Kai pointed at the bloodstains on the ground and said in a deep voice, "Kai Yun's murderer is also injured. From the looks of it, the murderer is at most in the late blood condensation realm. Furthermore, there is a faint demonic aura here. Kai Yun's murderer must be a monster. A demonic cultivator actually appeared in a village under the jurisdiction of our surplus river sect. This cannot happen again. We must kill that monster." The few surplus river sect cultivators bowed to Master Kai and were about to chase after Madame Du and the others when they heard Master Kai say, "Wait. There might be a 13 or 14-year-old young man among the murderers. His name is Du Giallo. We must capture him alive and not let him be injured." A few beams of light rose from the Du family village and met up with a dozen beams of light that flew over from the direction of the surplus river sect. These cultivators then split into groups of 3 to 5 and went in different directions to search. Du Giallo stood on the flying carpet and looked at the mountains and rivers under his feet rapidly moving backward. He said happily, "Mother, I didn't expect you to be even more powerful than an immortal." The little silver fox in Du Giallo's arms had also woken up. However, its expression was abnormally dispirited. It curled up in Du Giallo's arms and did not move at all. When it heard Du Giallo's words, the little fox seemed to have thought of something. It did not care about its internal injuries and gently wiggled its furry head. It looked under Du Giallo's arm at Madame Du, who was behind him. Du Giallo could feel the little fox's uneasiness in his arms. He followed the little fox's gaze and looked at Madame Du. He immediately exclaimed, "Mother, what's wrong?" Madame Du's face was as pale as a sheet. However, she was still trying her best to maintain the technique in her hands. When she heard Du Giallo's exclamation, Madame Du could no longer hold on. She spat out a third mouthful of blood and the flying carpet wobbled and fell to the ground. Madame Du used all her strength to land the flying carpet on the ground. Du Giallo placed the little fox in his arms on the shrunken silk handkerchief. Then, he quickly walked towards Madame Du, who had collapsed to the ground. When Madame Du saw Dujialoa walking towards her, she hurriedly said, "Luor, I can't walk anymore. Hurry and leave with your younger sister. The cultivators from the Abundant River sect will catch up soon. If you want to leave, we'll leave together." The stubborn Dujialoa helped Madame Du, who had collapsed to the ground, up. He prepared to carry Madame Du on his back and leave. Just as Dujialoa carried his adoptive mother, 3 streaks of light suddenly streaked across the sky. A long laugh resounded. "Ha ha, it's here. Evildoer, let's see where you can run to this time." Madame Du, who was originally too weak to get up, suddenly found the strength to stand up from Dujialoa's arms. Her pale face suddenly turned bright red, and she seemed to be in high spirits. Dujialoa hurriedly carried the little fox, who was lying on the ground, and picked up the silk handkerchief on the ground. In the blink of an eye, 3 rays of light appeared. A cultivator in his 30s led 2 other cultivators over. Madame Du looked at them. Although she tried her best to remain calm, her heart was already filled with despair. A core forging cultivator. The core forging cultivator from the Abundant River sect first looked at Dujialoa and the little silver fox in his arms. Then, he carefully sized up Madame Du. There was a strange look in his eyes as he said, "Who are you? Why are you with the demon?" "Humph!" Madame Du snorted coldly but did not say a word. She only stared coldly at the core forging cultivator from the Abundant River sect. When the core forging cultivator from the Abundant River sect saw that Madame Du was not speaking, he hesitated for a moment. Then, his expression changed. Suddenly, he snorted coldly, and the aura of a core forging cultivator surged out. He said loudly, "Why are you so rude? Are you looking down on the Abundant River sect?" Previously, Madame Du had used a mystic technique to make the core forging realm cultivators of the Ying-He sect appear cautious when they saw her. In reality, Madame Du was already at the end of her rope. Just as the core forging realm cultivators tried to probe her, Madame Du was immediately exposed. She could no longer withstand the spiritual force attack of the core forging realm cultivators of the Ying-He sect. She fell to the ground once again, but this time, she could no longer stand up. "Haha, I originally thought that you were a core forging cultivator from some sect, but it turns out that you're a fake. Since that's the case, you can go and die." The core forging cultivator from the Abundant River sect did not expect that Madame Du's core forging cultivator's aura was actually just a facade. He immediately laughed unscrupulously. When he thought about how he was almost deceived by a blood condensation cultivator from Madame Du, he immediately became angry out of humiliation. He pointed his finger forward, and a sword of chi shot out towards Madame Du, who was on the ground. At that moment, Madame Du no longer had any strength to fight back. She could only close her eyes and await her death. However, she still looked to the side unwillingly. Her adopted son and daughter were still there. However, just as Madame Du turned her head to look at her son and daughter one last time, she saw Dujialoa suddenly take out a golden talisman from his robes and tear it. "A talisman treasure? Where did Dujialoa get this talisman treasure?" Before Madame Du fainted, she was extremely curious as to why her adopted son would have a talisman treasure on him. Moreover, from the color of the talisman treasure, it was obviously a talisman treasure from a late-stage core forging cultivator. However, the Abundant River sect cultivator's cultivation had also reached the core forging stage. How effective could Dujialoa's talisman treasure be? However, Madame Du could no longer see the result of the talisman treasure. Just as the golden talisman treasure in Dujialoa's hand turned into a sky full of golden sword chi and swept towards the Abundant River sect cultivators, Madame Du had already lost consciousness. The Abundant River sect cultivator did not expect a mortal youth to have a talisman treasure that was obviously from a late-stage core forging cultivator. He also did not expect this mortal youth to be able to activate the talisman treasure in his hand. What was even more unexpected was that this late-stage core forging cultivator's talisman treasure was actually so powerful. Even though the Abundant River sect cultivator could tell that the golden talisman treasure was extraordinary the moment Dujialoa took it out, he did not take it to heart. Firstly, it was not easy to activate a talisman treasure. The cultivator's cultivation had to be at least at the blood condensation realm. Secondly, a talisman treasure was extremely powerful against blood condensation realm cultivators, but against an early-stage core forging cultivator like him, it had lost its original power. Even if this talisman treasure was from a late-stage core forging cultivator, it would still be the same. If he was prepared, this talisman treasure might not be able to hurt him. Just as the golden talisman treasure shone brightly, the core forging enlightened master's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the two blood condensation realm disciples behind him might not be able to protect themselves. However, when the sky was filled with sword light that gushed out from the golden light, the core forging enlightened master's expression changed again. He suddenly clenched his hands together, and streaks of green wind spiraled out from his body. Then, they formed a green wind pillar that surrounded the core forging enlightened master in the center. The moment the talisman treasure was activated, the sword light that shot out instantly cut the two blood condensation realm disciples behind the core forging enlightened master into 17 to 18 pieces. However, under the core forging enlightened master's shocked gaze, a sky-piercing sword light suddenly shot out from the golden light that filled the sky. The golden light slashed down, and the green wind pillar was like a piece of cloth that was torn into two by the sky-piercing sword light. When the core forging enlightened master saw that his protective magic treasure had been destroyed, he hurriedly activated his protective earth energy and turned to escape. However, the sky-piercing sword light caught up to him and chopped off half of his left arm and shoulder. It was a pity that this talisman treasure was in the hands of a mortal youth like Dujialuo. If it had fallen into the hands of a cultivator, even the weakest blood condensation realm cultivator, this core forging enlightened master would not have been able to escape death. The core forging enlightened master could not care less about the severe injury on his left arm and shoulder. At this moment, he was already scared out of his wits. There had never been a late-stage core forging enlightened master with such power, unless this talisman treasure was activated by a core forging realm cultivator. That's right, there must be a core forging realm cultivator lying in ambush here. Only then could this talisman treasure be so powerful. When the core forging enlightened master thought of this, he sped up. The blood on his shoulder that had not completely stopped dripping fell into the light, and was immediately ignited by a secret technique. His speed instantly increased by 2 times. Dujialuo was at the end of his rope when he remembered the golden paper that Lu Ping had left for him to save his life. As a mortal, how could Dujialuo know that this unusually bright golden paper was a priceless talisman treasure? However, the moment he opened the talisman treasure, the golden sword light that filled the sky and covered the sun dazzled Dujialuo's eyes. The majestic sky-piercing sword light, under Dujialuo's incredulous gaze, completely defeated the arrogant current core forging enlightened master of the Yinghe sect. In Dujialuo's mind, an immortal in his 20s looked at him with an unfathomable gaze when he handed him this talisman treasure. He knew that all of this would happen today. He must have expected it. Dujialuo wrapped the silk handkerchief into a cloth bag and placed the little fox in it. Then, he tied it to his neck and bent down to carry the dying Madame Du on his back. Then, he walked south towards the Ying River. The immortal who had given him that mysterious piece of paper had traveled upstream from the lower reaches of the Ying River. If he wanted to find these two immortals, he would have to go upstream again. Dujialuo knew that his adoptive mother and he had both killed the immortals of the Yinghe sect. Now that his adoptive mother, who was originally an immortal, was severely injured, if he wanted to survive the pursuit of the Yinghe sect, he would have to find the two immortals again. After the Ying Tian sect was destroyed, the Ying Tian dojo went missing. The lone peak of the heavenly mountain where the sect was located was razed to the ground by the forces that had destroyed the Ying Tian sect. Other than the Ying Tian sect's inheritance that was left in the Ying Tian dojo, most of the Ying Tian sect's inheritance was divided among the forces that had destroyed the Ying Tian sect. However, even a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. The Ying Tian sect's hidden treasure in this mountain range was not limited to the Ying Tian dojo. The Surplus River sect, Ying Mountain sect, and Tao Universe sect were the three sects that had gradually developed after itinerant cultivators had discovered the treasures left behind by the surplus sky sect in the mountain range. They had used these treasures as their foundation. Now, these three sects were advancing side by side and had developed into small sects in the cultivation world. Each of these sects was overseen by Adept Laozu. Even so, the Yinghe sect was only a small sect after all. They might not care about the death of a few blood condensation realm cultivators, but when a core forging realm cultivator returned with his shoulder and arm chopped off, the Yinghe sect could not sit still anymore. Moreover, this core forging realm cultivator had been injured by a mortal using a talisman treasure. This was the biggest joke in the world. If news of this spread to the Yingshan sect and the Tao Universe sect, the Yinghe sect would lose all face. Moreover, among the two humans and one demon that had escaped, the young mortal was someone that the Yinghe sect's Laozu wanted to capture. Although the Yinghe sect's cultivators did not know why the Yinghe sect's Laozu valued a young mortal, the Yinghe sect's only adept Laozu was the Yinghe sect's stabilizing force. Since he had taken a liking to this young mortal, the entire Yinghe sect would not think of anything else. They only wanted to capture this young mortal. If the Yinghe sect's Laozu valued them and gave them some pointers, they would be able to benefit from it for the rest of their lives. Grandmaster Kai immediately sensed the scene of the mortal youth injuring a core forging cultivator of his sect with a treasure talisman. Glancing at the broken limbs on the ground, Grandmaster Kai took 2 steps forward and picked up a torn golden talisman from the ground. Chapter 633. Although Du Jiaoluo was extremely strong, he was only a 12-year-old mortal. He carried his adoptive mother, Madame Du, on his back, and his little sister, a silver fox, in front of him. Relying on his previous tenacity, he finally could not walk any further after walking 7 or 8 kilometers in one go. He had no choice but to gently put his mother and little sister down to rest. Although the little silver fox was still unable to move, she was still conscious. After Du Jiaoluo put her down, she stared at the unconscious Madame Du and cried. Du Jiaoluo softly called out, "Mother," twice. However, Madame Du did not seem to hear him. Her brows were tightly furrowed in her unconscious state. It was obvious that she had suffered great pain before she fainted. Du Jiaoluo knew that his family was currently in a dangerous situation. Thus, after resting for a while, he once again carried Madame Du and the little fox on his back and rushed back to the surplus river. However, Du Jiaoluo had just stood up when he froze. He did not know when, but a middle-aged man who looked somewhat similar to Kai Yun, who had died in Madame Du's hands, was standing not too far away from him. He was looking at the unconscious Madame Du with a contemplative expression. He saw Du Jiaoluo frantically stand in front of Madame Du and the little fox, using his body to protect them. Only then did he see that there was a small mouse lying at the middle-aged man's feet. Its little eyes were darting around. The middle-aged cultivator's expression was as calm as an ancient well. He reached out and picked up a torn golden talisman. "Who gave this talisman to you?" Du Jiaoluo immediately understood that the person in front of him was a cultivator from the surplus river sect. Furthermore, he looked like an immortal of a higher rank than the cultivators who had chased after him earlier. However, the immortal who had given him this talisman was undoubtedly his savior. Thus he stiffened his neck and said, "I picked it up." A trace of malice flashed across the middle-aged cultivator's eyes. He said coldly, "Kid, do you think that the old man does not know just because you are not telling me? Let me ask you, was this talisman given to you by the 2 cultivators who came to Celestial Mountain's Lone Peak a few days ago?" Du Jiaoluo did not know how the person in front of him could be sure that this talisman treasure was given to him by Lu Ping that day, but he knew that once he admitted it, it would definitely bring trouble to the 2 immortals who gave him 2 spirit stones and a talisman treasure to save his life. The immortals of the Yinghe immortal sect were all people with boundless dermic powers. The immortal in front of him looked very old and was definitely more powerful than the 2 young immortals from the other 2 days. If he admitted it, he would definitely bring trouble to those 2 kind-hearted immortals. Du Jiaoluo knew that he couldn't escape today, so he said resolutely, "No! The middle-aged cultivator in front of him was Master Kai of the Abundant River sect. He was also the third uncle of the cultivator Kai Yun who had died in the hands of the Du clan. He was the person who had tried to spy on Lu Ping and De Bao on the lone peak of the Heavenly Mountain. Although Du Jialua had changed directions and walked 7 to 8 kilometers in one go, Master Kai easily determined the direction that Du Jialua had escaped in with the rat demon under his feet and chased after him. Although Du Jialua tried his best to deny it, the middle-aged cultivator was very experienced and could not be compared to a 12 or 13-year-old mortal youth. At that moment, he was almost certain that this strange talisman treasure had definitely come from the two mysterious young cultivators from the other day. The reason why Master Kai asked about the origin of this talisman treasure was not only because it could be activated by a mortal, but also because he suspected the identity of the two young cultivators. To be able to casually give such a strange talisman treasure to a mortal and possess strength that was not inferior to his at such a young age, these two young cultivators were very similar to the elite disciples of famous sects who were out traveling. What Master Kai was worried about now was whether the two cultivators had already seen through the uniqueness of this young man. If they had seen through it and left such a powerful talisman treasure for him to protect himself, then if the Abundant River sect took this young man away, they would inevitably offend these two young cultivators who were most likely from famous sects in the Central Plains. These cultivators were used to being arrogant, and had always been troublemakers in the Central Plains. Once these two cultivators got involved in this matter with the Abundant River sect and drew out the powers of the sects behind them, then a small force like the Abundant River sect would not be able to go up against them. However, if they let this young man go just like that, then the medicinal power of this young man's bloodline that he had used to strengthen his body would probably fall into the hands of others. Master Kai thought about how his sect's Laozu had already reached the peak of the early Dharma stage. If he could use this young man's bloodline to refine a human elixir, then his sect's Laozu would have a high chance of advancing to the mid-Dharma stage. At that time, the Abundant River sect would be able to suppress the Yingshan sect and the Daoyu sect and become the strongest sect in this mountain range. Master Kai's status in the sect would also rise. At that time, if he had the support of his sect's Laozu, his level of practice might even increase to the next level. It would not be impossible for him to have a chance to enter the Dharma stage in the future. When he turned around, he saw a boy around the age of 10 wearing strange stone armor. He held a halberd that was twice his height. The sneak attack just now was done by this boy with the halberd in his hands. But before Master Kai could prepare, a whip shadow took advantage of the space Master Kai was dodging and instantly cut into Master Kai's capture god art, freeing Du Jialua from midair. There's another person? This time, Master Kai no longer cared about the mortal boy that Laozu thought highly of. He immediately fled several tens of feet away. When he saw that the three did not take advantage of the opportunity to attack him, he turned around and looked at the third core forging stage demon cultivator who had just rescued Du Jialua. She was still a little girl, but different from the naive little girl from before. This little girl had more of an adult's aura. Although the three demon cultivators were only at the third layer of the core forging stage, Master Kai did not underestimate them at all. Instead, he was very wary of them. It was not only because of the strength that the three of them had displayed just now, but also because Master Kai could not see through the three demon cultivators at all. Master Kai looked at the little fox demon and Du Shi on the ground and said in a low voice, "I wonder which demon king you three belong to? I am Overflowing River Sect's alchemist Kai Jinfeng." The three children were Sam Ling. When Lu Hai heard Kai Jinfeng's words, he couldn't help but sneer. "What is the Overflowing River Sect? And who are you, Kai Jinfeng? What's so great about you?" Kai Jinfeng's face flashed with anger, but he immediately restrained himself and said, "I am indeed not that great. However, my martial uncle is Changhe Laozu. I believe the demon king that the three of you serve knows about this." Lu Linger giggled and was about to say something, but she was interrupted by Lu Bai. She said, "Linger, can't you tell that alchemist Kai is stalling for time? The cultivators from the Surplus River sect who are supposed to receive him should be arriving soon." Lu Linger pursed her lips unhappily, but she didn't say anything else. Kai Zhenfeng laughed dryly. Just as he was about to say something, Lu Bai spoke first. Mr. Kai, we have no intention of making things difficult for you or your sect. However, we will be taking these 3 people away today. I believe Mr. Kai will not have any objections. Kai Zhenfeng looked at the Samling, who were walking towards him in a triangular formation. He had no confidence that he could defeat the 3 of them. Although he was a 5th-layer core forging stage cultivator, he was still an alchemist. His strength was not considered strong among cultivators of the same level. Kai Zhenfeng looked at the Samling, who was glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. Then, he looked at Du Jialuo, who was standing in front of the unconscious Madame Du and the little fox demon. Kai Zhenfeng did not know what to do. When the Samling saw that he was not speaking, he thought that Kai Zhenfeng was stalling for time again, so he quickly approached him. Kai Zhenfeng's heart tightened and he hurriedly said, Please wait. You can take the little fox demon and the woman with you. However, the mortal boy has nothing to do with the 3 of you. I hope that the 3 of you can give me some face and leave him with our sect. What do you think? Kai Zhenfeng thought that the 3 core forging stage beasts had appeared because of the little fox demon and Madame Du. From Kai Zhenfeng's point of view, as long as he could bring Du Jialuo back to the overflowing river sect, the others had nothing to do with him. The Samling looked at each other. Kai Zhenfeng saw this and thought that the Samling was tempted. After all, he was a 5th-layer core forging stage cultivator. If the 3 of them really wanted to fight to the death with him, he was confident that he could hold on until the cultivators of the overflowing river sect arrived. Haha, since that's the case, the 3 of you, what do you want to do? How dare you? Rumble. A series of explosions rang out as the 3 beasts launched their attacks. Kai Zhenfeng, who had originally thought that the situation was no longer a big deal, was caught off guard. He didn't expect that the 3 early core forging realm beasts in front of him would have such tyrannical strength when they joined forces. For a time, he was beaten back by the 3 beasts and was in a very sorry state. Originally, Kai Zhenfeng thought that his conditions were enough to tempt the Samling. However, he did not expect that the Samling's purpose was to come for the mortal Du Jialuo, not the little fox demon and Madame Du, who was lying on the ground. The Samling's minds were interlinked. When they attacked, they cooperated with each other, especially Lu Linger. She usually acted like a spoiled child in front of Lu Ping, so she had obtained several magic treasures from Lu Ping. It could be said that apart from De Bail, Lu Linger had the most magic treasures among Lu Ping's spiritual pets. In addition, she had integrated part of the inheritance of the Ice Dragon clan through the Ice Dragon Pearl. Her strength could be said to be the best among the Samling. Although Lu Hai did not have as many magic treasures as Lu Linger, he cultivated water attribute skills, so he received the most pointers from Lu Ping. Lu Hai was a solid person and all his efforts were spent on cultivation. If Lu Linger did not win with magic treasures, Lu Linger might not be Lu Hai's match even if she became the leader of the Ice Dragon clan. Among the Samling, Lu Bai, who was the eldest sister, was the weakest. However, when the Samling joined forces to fight against the enemy, Lu Bai was often the link between Lu Hai and Lu Linger. She was the link between the Samling and the Samling as a whole. Once it touched them, the 3 of them would be reduced to ashes. Kai Zhenfeng was betting. He was betting that Samling would not just watch as Du Jialuo and the other 2 died. The flame released from the pill cauldron was a mid-grade earth-level spiritual fire of heaven and earth that Long River Laozu had rewarded Kai Zhenfeng after he had successfully advanced to become an alchemy grandmaster. It was the foundation of Kai Zhenfeng's survival in the sect and the fundamental medium for him to use his final trump card to save his life. As expected, although it was difficult for the Samling to block Kai Zhenfeng's flame magic, they might be able to block Kai Zhenfeng again if they worked together. However, when the flame rushed towards Du Jialuo and the others, Lu Hai had no choice but to retreat and block the flame. In this way, the encirclement formed by the Samling's cooperation had a flaw. Kai Zhenfeng laughed loudly. Haha, the mountains will never change and the rivers will always flow. The Yinghe sect will remember what you have given me today. We will definitely repay you in the future. As he spoke, his figure had already turned into a ball of flame and fled outwards. Trying to run? Lu Linger sneered and took out an item from her hand. She suddenly injected all the vital energy in her body into it. A talisman weapon! Kai Jinfeng looked at the item in Lu Linger's hand and his pupils shrank. Waves of despair crashed into his mind. Chapter 634. The practitioner weapon slowly rose up, and a yellow light covered Kai Jinfeng's body. He felt as if a mountain was pressing down on his body. Kai Jinfeng used all the true essence in his body to break free, but it was difficult for him to fly away. Kai Jinfeng had no choice but to use the elixir furnace that was floating in the air to hit Lu Linger. At the same time, the spiritual fire in the elixir furnace burned the practitioner weapon that was emitting the yellow light. Lu Linger was not surprised but happy. The protective chi on her body flashed, and a 3-foot thick ice appeared in front of her, temporarily blocking the impact of the elixir furnace and the spiritual fire. Lu Bai took the opportunity to swing the spirit whip in her hand and wrapped it around one of the bronze feet at the bottom of the elixir furnace. Lu Hai suddenly followed and worked with Lu Linger to suppress the spiritual fire back into the elixir furnace. At this time, Kai Jinfeng could see that the 3 demonic cultivators were not trying to kill him, but for his high-grade elixir furnace. This elixir furnace could be said to be the foundation of his survival in the Yinghe sect. However, if he did not take the opportunity to escape and wait for the 3 to free themselves, it would be his death. Kai Jinfeng stirred up the vital energy in his body. While Samling was suppressing the elixir furnace and the spiritual fire, he escaped like a snail, trying to escape from the yellow light. It was not easy for the 3 spirits to obtain a high-grade pill furnace and an earth-ranked mid-grade spirit fire. How could they still care about Kai Jinfeng? Kai Jinfeng had finally escaped from the light of the talisman weapon. He did not dare to turn back and immediately fled in the direction of the Abundant River sect. Lu Bai put away the elixir furnace and the suppressed spiritual fire. Lu Hai scratched his head and asked curiously, Linger, didn't Father give this practitioner weapon to Brother de Bail? How did you get this talisman weapon from him? Lu Linger smiled proudly and said, You don't have to worry about that. In short, I have something on Brother de Bail. If he does not give it to me, I will tell Father about his embarrassment. At that time, humph. Lu Bai looked at the somewhat at a loss Dujialua and said, All right, I have more or less completed the task that Father instructed me to do. We should not stay here for long. We need to leave this place quickly. As she finished speaking, Lu Bai directly swept the spirit whip in her hand, and the Du clan was wrapped within it. Du Jiao's expression became anxious, but before he could do anything, Lu Hai, who was at the side, picked him up. The remaining little fox demon giggled and picked up the little fox demon who was curled up on the ground, trembling all over. Samling was about to rise into the conveyance light when he heard Lu Linger say with a smile, Oh, I almost forgot that there is a little guy here. Take him back. Maybe Brother de Bail will like him. When Du Jiao looked over, he saw a piece of ice suddenly appear under the feet of a silver-white mouse that was about to escape. The little mouse tumbled on the ice, but it could not escape the restraints of the ice. In the end, it seemed to realize that it could not escape. It could only tremble all over and look pitifully at Samling, who was already floating in the air. Lu Linger giggled, and the little mouse flew backwards. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws in the air, and then landed in Lu Linger's conveyance light. On the side of Ing River, 3 conveyance lights descended. Samling, Du Jiaoa, and the others appeared on the shore of Ing River. Lu Bai frowned and looked at the sky in the distance behind her. She saw several conveyance lights streaking across the sky, approaching from afar, chasing in the direction of the 3 of them. Lu Bai knew very well that this mission was actually a process that Lu Ping used to test them. If they did not succeed this time, it was likely that Samling would not be able to leave Lu Ping's sight for a long time. Although Samling did not want to leave Lu Ping, they were eager to grow up, eager to be recognized by Lu Ping. If they could not even complete this small task, even if Lu Ping did not say anything, Sam Ling would feel extremely disappointed. Lu Bai turned around and said, "Linger, you take the three of them and leave first. Second brother and I will hold them off for a while." Before Lu Linger could speak, a whirlpool suddenly appeared in the middle of Ing River. Then, a giant turtle with a shell of at least 3 meters in diameter suddenly floated up from the river. Lu Linger said happily, "Brother Dague, did father ask you to come and help us?" This giant turtle was Lu Dague's original body. The giant turtle nodded at the three of them, and then approached the river bank. Lu Linger clapped her hands and said with a smile, "That's great. Brother Dague, you should take this boy, his mother, and sister back to father's cave residence first. By the way, there is also this little mouse. It looks like a spirit-seeking mouse. I think Brother Debeo will like it." Under Du Jialuo's frightened gaze, the 2 humans and 2 demons were thrown onto the back of the huge tortoise by the 3 spirits. Before Du Jialuo could cry out in alarm, the tortoise sank into the water with them. Lu Linger turned to Lu Bai and Lu Hai and smiled. "This is good. The 3 of us can go all out and fight against the human cultivators of the Ing River sect." Sam Ling looked at each other and smiled. Then, he immediately flew up to meet the few rays of light in the sky. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion in the sky. In the sky above the Ing River where Lu Dague had just disappeared, it was as if a curtain had been lifted, revealing the 3 cultivators hidden inside. The person in front frowned and looked at Sam Ling, who was fighting with the cultivators of the Ing River sect a few miles away. He did not speak for a long time. Next to him, a cultivator in his 30s with thick eyebrows and big eyes turned to the cultivator next to him and said with some shock, "Why are there sea demons here? Could it be that this trip to Central Mainland has already been leaked and the news of the Ing Tian Sect's dojo has already been found out by the demons overseas? But what was the background of those 3 little demons? Why can't I, a late core forging cultivator, see through them? Brother Zhang, did you discover anything?" On his other side, a stern-faced cultivator glanced at him indifferently, then asked the person in front, "Martial uncle, have you figured out the origins of those 3 little demons?" If Lu Ping was here, he would definitely be able to recognize that the cultivator with a cold expression was Zhenren Zhangxi, one of the best of the 2nd-generation cultivators of the Tsunghai sect. As for the elder in front, he was Dongwu Laozu, who was at the peak of the early Dharma stage. "It's the green sea snakes." Ancestor Dongwu let out a long sigh of relief, and he said with a trace of rejoicing, "Fortunately, we didn't make a move to kill him just because he was a cultivator from the demon race. Otherwise, we would have surely caused a great calamity this time. The Jade Sea Spirit Serpent clan isn't something my Blue Sea sect can afford to offend." "What? The green sea snakes?" The cultivator with thick eyebrows and big eyes from the Tsunghai sect with the surname Lu widened his eyes. He took a deep breath and said, "How did the king of the East Sea Demon clan get his hands on the North Ice Plains? Could the news of the Ing Tian sect have been leaked?" Not only cultivator Lu, but even Zhangxi, who was standing next to him, had a look of surprise on his face. The Emerald Sea Spirit Snake clan's notoriety in the East Sea cultivation world was much greater than that of the primordial giant crocodile in the North Sea cultivation world. Its true strength was much stronger than that of the other 2 top demon clans in the East Sea, the Fire Phoenix clan and the Queenfish clan. It was the only demon clan in the East Sea that could confront the Crystal Palace head-on. The appearance of the green sea snakes in the North Ice Plains made the cultivators of the Tsunghai sect suspicious. Cultivator Lu blinked and said, "Could it be that the green sea snakes really know about the Ing Tian sect? But this information is only known to the true core cultivators of the top 10 sects of the North Sea. Could it be that there are demon spies among these core cultivators? Or did the Emerald Sea Spirit Snake clan discover our tracks?" Zhang Shi thought for a while and said, "It's not very likely. Although the top sects sneaked into the Middle Earth separately, they used the super long-distance teleportation formation of the top 5 sects of the East Sea. It's impossible for the green sea snakes to know about it." At this time, Dongwu Laozi said again, Maybe it's not the green sea snakes. Zhang Shi was confused and asked, What do you mean, martial uncle? Ancestor Dong was said faintly. Don't forget about that turtle demon from before, and that little fox demon, and that spirit-seeking mouse. Moreover, that woman that fainted is closely related to the demon race as well. Zhang Shi thought for a while and said, That's right. Just now, the green sea snake mentioned father and someone's name. It sounds like it's related to demon cultivators. These demon cultivators belong to different races, but they can gather together. That's what's strange about them. Cultivator Lu said in a low, muffled voice. Martial uncle, are you saying that these demon cultivators have a cultivator with a higher cultivation and status as their backer? This is the real reason why these demon cultivators of different races can gather together, and even challenge the local tyrant, the Abundant River sect? Donghua Laozi shook his head and said, Although it makes sense, it might not be correct. Donghua Laozi thought for a while and asked Zhang Shi, Martial nephew Zhang, you once traveled the Middle Earth. Have you heard of the spirit beast taming sect? Zhang Shi was surprised. Martial uncle suspects that the person leading these demon cultivators is a cultivator from the spirit beast taming sect? Then, he suddenly said, Yes, what martial uncle said makes a lot of sense. Only the mysterious beast-taming spirit sect cultivators can integrate these different races of demonic cultivators together, and not make them lose their spiritual wisdom because of the spiritual sense of the demonic cultivators. However, the cultivators from the spirit beast-taming sect have always been very mysterious in the cultivation world. I didn't expect to encounter them here. In that case, we can't afford to offend these demon cultivators. Otherwise, if we offend these mysterious fellows from the spirit beast-taming sect, they might be even more troublesome to deal with than the green sea snakes. However, although the spirit beast-taming sect has always had an ambiguous relationship with the demon clan, I've never heard of anyone being so bold as to make a green sea snake their demon pet. Donghua Laozi said meaningfully. Not all cultivators from the spirit beast-taming sect are humans. The lucky Lu Dagui did not know that he had already been noticed. When he floated up from the Yinghe River, he had already arrived at the entrance of the cave. At the entrance of the cave, Du Jialuo, who was still in a state of shock, immediately saw one of the two immortals who had gone to the lone peak of the celestial mountain. He was a chubby young immortal with a mustache who had been smiling all along. He was standing there looking at him. Du Jialuo's expression brightened. The anxiety he had felt after being rescued by Sam Ling and encountering Lu Dagui immediately disappeared. Chapter 635. When Madame Du slowly woke up from her coma, she found that she was in a rock cave. She jumped up and found that her body, which had long been on the verge of death, had healed more than half of its injuries. However, Madame Du did not lower her guard at all. She had experienced far too many things like this. The cultivation world was full of deceit and deception, especially human cultivators. Although she believed that her intelligence was not inferior to anyone in the Yao clan, she did not dare to fight with human cultivators at all. That was simply digging her own grave. She was most worried about her two children. She did not know that the Yinghe sect was pursuing her not only because she had killed a cultivator from the Yinghe sect, but also because of her adopted son, Du Jialuo, who had a bloodline full of medicinal power. Madame Du slowly walked out of her stone room and saw a fat young man who was about 17 or 18 years old. He had a mustache and was walking towards her. Behind this fat young man's feet, a silver-white little mouse was following him step by step. After discovering someone, the little mouse quickly slid down the fat young man's trouser leg and climbed onto his shoulder. Then, it hid behind his ear and carefully peeked its head out to look at Madame Du in front of him. "Haha, you are awake? My boss wants to see you. Come with me. Spirit-seeking mouse demon?" Madame Du looked at De Bao in surprise. However, she immediately realized that what she was doing was very inappropriate. She quickly said, "May I ask which demon king you are serving? Where are my two children now?" Although Madame Du tried her best to remain calm, A spirit-seeking mouse that could cultivate to the core forging realm still brought her an inexplicable shock. Spirit-seeking mice were the lowest level of demon beasts in the cultivation world. Those that could cultivate to the late blood-refining realm could be called the ancestors of the spirit-seeking mice. Now, in front of her was a living spirit-seeking mouse that had taken human form. DeBeo turned to look at Madame Du. He was not angry that Madame Du had exposed his identity. Instead, he turned and said as he walked, "Your two children are fine now. Come with me. My boss has something to ask you." Madame Du, who was in a hurry, followed DeBeo towards the stone room where Lu Ping was. From afar, she saw Du Jiao kneeling in front of a stone room. "Look!" Madame Du's voice was filled with joy. Du Jiao was stunned. He turned around and saw Madame Du standing not far behind him, unscathed. He immediately jumped up from the ground and rushed towards Madame Du. He said in surprise, "Mother, you're actually fine?" Madame Du looked at the smiling DeBeo and immediately understood. Du Jiao was kneeling on the ground. Clearly, he was begging the mysterious boss to save him. As expected, DeBeo said with a smile, "Your filial piety is commendable. When he saw that you were on the verge of death when you were rescued and brought back to the abode, he begged my boss to save you. Even though I've told him over and over again that your injuries are fine, that kid still knelt on the ground and refused to get up, and he insisted on seeing that you're fine." Madame Du rubbed Du Jiao's head and said to DeBeo gratefully, "Thank you very much, Your Excellency." DeBeo chuckled and said, "You don't have to thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank my boss." Madame Du nodded and said, "I wonder where my daughter is now. Please tell me, Your Excellency." Just as Madame Du finished speaking, she saw a little girl who looked like she was carved from jade walk out of the stone room. Who else could it be other than the little fox demon in her hands? When the injured little fox demon saw Madame Du, she immediately leaped out of the little girl's arms and ran towards Madame Du. Madame Du bent down and held the fox demon tightly in her arms. Lu Linger was surprised when she saw that Madame Du was the little fox demon's mother. However, she still said, "Father is already waiting inside. You should come with me to see him first." When Madame Du saw that her daughter was safe and sound, she felt a faint pressure coming from the little girl in front of her. She actually felt a natural pressure from the little girl. This was the pressure of a top-level demon beast. Madame Du's heart trembled. If it was said that the lowest-level demon beast, the spirit-seeking mouse, was able to grow into a core forging stage cultivator, then the appearance of this little girl made Madame Du feel a faint sense of awe towards this cultivator that she had never met before. Once they entered the stone room, a thick wave of spiritual qi immediately bathed everyone in it. Madame Du took 2 deep breaths and an intoxicated expression appeared on her face. How many years had it been since she had felt such thick spiritual qi? However, what shocked her even more was that after she entered the stone room, she immediately saw 2 more children who looked similar to the little girl from before, a boy and a girl. The blood pressure from the 3 children caused the Du clan to not dare to move at all. Even though her cultivation had been higher than the 3 of them in the past, the natural suppression from the blood of the Yao clan filled her with fear. She had learned from Du Jiao about the situation after she fainted that day. She knew that these 3 childlike cultivators were the saviors of her family. At the same time, a huge turtle brought them to this cave mansion. The fat young man just now was one of the 2 immortals that she met that day who went to the lone peak of Heavenly Mountain and gave her 2 spirit stones. The other immortal gave her a life-saving treasure talisman. He was the boss that the fat immortal spoke of and the father that the 3 little immortals spoke of. After that, Madame Du saw the turtle immortal who brought her family to this cave mansion. He was a simple and sturdy young man and a 13 or 14-year-old little girl. Madame Du also felt the blood pressure of a top-level demon beast from this little girl again. However, compared with the 3 younger children, the blood pressure of this little girl was a little weaker. Moreover, it was slightly different from the previous 3 people. Obviously, they were not of the same race, but her cultivation level was higher than that of the 3 children. Madame Du silently followed behind de Bail. In her heart, she was even more in awe and curiosity about the unknown cultivator. She also had a vague guess about the identity of that person. In the stone room, Lu Ping was studying the ancient book about the creation of high-grade talismans that he brought out from the Tian dojo, especially about the creation of the restriction-breaking talisman. Lu Ping himself was quite experienced in breaking restrictions. Unfortunately, the inheritance of the restriction-breaking talisman in Jinling could only reach 5 colors. Moreover, there were many gaps in the inheritance of the 5th color. In Jinling, other than Tian Shui Laozu, who could rely on her Dharma manifestation stage cultivation, even Xian Ju Junren could only make a 4-colored restriction-breaking talisman. Moreover, the spiritual materials and resources wasted in the process of making the restriction-breaking talisman sometimes did not make up for the loss. Just when Lu Ping had made some progress in the study of the 4-colored restriction-breaking talisman, he saw de Bail walking into his training room and saying, "Boss, that kid's mother has woken up." When Madame Du walked into Lu Ping's training room, she saw a young man with no trace of spiritual energy sitting cross-legged on the seat of honor. Madame Du did not think that the person in front of her was an ordinary person just because there was no spiritual energy coming from him. This meant that the person in front of her had already reached the realm of returning to one's natural state. Even when her cultivation was not damaged in the past, she was afraid that she would not be a match for this young man in front of her. Thus, Madame Du lowered her attitude even more. She respectfully knelt in front of Lu Ping and said, "This widow, Madame Du, thanks Immortal for saving my life." A green light flashed in Lu Ping's eyes as he looked at Madame Du in front of him. He had a look of surprise on his face as he said, "Fellow Taoist, you are originally from the Demon Fox clan, right? This is the first time I have seen someone possessed by a golden core. Seeing that your consciousness is not damaged, I believe that before the possession, your cultivation was no lower than the late core forging stage. However, it seems that even though your consciousness was not damaged before the possession, your golden core was heavily damaged. Your cultivation has dropped all the way to the late blood condensation stage. What a pity!" When Madame Du heard that Lu Ping had exposed her identity with just one word, her whole body trembled like a sieve. However, she was after all a late core forging stage cultivator. After a while, she calmed down and said, "I am confident that my Demon Fox clan's secret technique will not be seen through by cultivators below the Dharma realm. I didn't think that you would be able to see through my identity with just one look." When Lu Ping saw that Madame Du admitted to it calmly, he smiled and said, "It's just a small trick. It's just that this is the first time I have seen someone possessed by a Demon Fox clan, so I can't help but be a little curious. I hope that fellow Taoist won't be offended. However, does that kid outside know that you are not his mother?" Madame Du nodded and said, "The person I possessed was not his mother, but a woman who was on the verge of death. She was later rescued by Luo's father. After recovering, I found that my cultivation foundation was greatly damaged and I could no longer advance. At the same time, I was afraid of the dangers of the cultivation world. In order to repay a debt of gratitude, I married Luo's father and wanted to be a mortal woman. Unexpectedly, Luo's father died of an illness 10 years ago, and I gave birth to a daughter. I had no choice but to raise the brother and sister with all my heart. Fortunately, Luo knew my identity from a young age. Luo's nature is pure, and he did not have any negative emotions just because he had a demon foster mother and a mixed-blood sister. On the contrary, he was very filial." Lu Ping nodded. But then, he asked curiously, "Fellow Taoist, although you're a monster, you were also a monster cultivator before you took over my body. You should have some understanding of human cultivation. Why did you give your adopted son a body-strengthening treasure before he even awakened his bloodline and became a cultivator? Don't you know that this will cause him to lose the opportunity to activate his bloodline and become a cultivator?" How do you know?" Madame Du was inexplicably shocked. She looked at the calm Lu Ping and seemed to be at a loss. "De Bail, who was at the side, saw that Madame Du's face was full of wariness and said with some dissatisfaction, "Humph, I'm afraid you still don't know. Do you really think that the cultivator from the Yinghe sect would come and treat your injuries out of kindness? They only wanted your adopted son's pure bloodline that is filled with medicinal power. Don't tell me you don't know what a human pill is." Chapter 636. Mortal core? Madame Du exclaimed. She clearly had some understanding of mortal cores. De Bail continued, "Of course it's a mortal core. Otherwise, do you think the blood condensation adept from the Yinghe sect would go to your house to treat you for no reason? I'm afraid that when the Yinghe sect went to the Du family village to test if the youths in the village had the potential to activate their bloodline, your son's secret had already been discovered. I heard that the Yinghe sect also has a Dharma adept named Laozu. I'm sure you understand the importance of treasures that can strengthen the body of a Dharma adept, right?" Madame Du asked in confusion. "But why didn't the Yinghe sect take Luo'er away when they discovered that there was something wrong with his body? Why did they let our family live in the village?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "Let me explain this. The most important part of refining a mortal core is one's bloodline, one that is full of vitality. Furthermore, it has to be consumed soon after refining the mortal core. Only then will it have the greatest effect in the shortest time possible. The Dharma adept of the Yinghe sect is probably not prepared for this, which is why he allowed you to live. In their eyes, you are just a bunch of mortals. Do you think you can escape from their control?" Madame Du was stunned and did not speak. After a while, she seemed to react and knelt before Lu Ping. She said, "Friend, please save the three of us." Lu Ping waved his hand and helped Madame Du up from the ground. He said, "Fellow Taoist, you don't have to do this. Although I am not a match for the Yinghe sect's old ancestor, as long as you hide here temporarily, I believe the Yinghe sect's cultivators won't be able to find you. However, I still want to know why fellow Taoist gave your adopted son the medicinal pellet to strengthen his body before he activated his bloodline." Lu Ping could tell that although Lu Ping had seen through many of Madame Du's secrets, she was still very wary of him. Thus, he questioned her and tried to gain the upper hand. Indeed, from Lu Ping's words, Madame Du could tell that he did not trust her identity as a demon. She sighed and said, "This is because of my daughter." With that, Madame Du told Lu Ping about the process of Du Jialoa consuming the mortal core. It turned out that Madame Du's attempt at possession was not successful and had many repercussions. She had been bedridden all these years. When Du Jialoa was bedridden, his little fox sister saw that her brother was working hard, so she often went deep into the mountains to collect wild fruits and vegetables in order to reduce her brother's burden. However, during this process, the little fox demon had mistaken some kind of mortal core as a wild fruit for Du Jialoa to eat. Du Jialoa did not know what was going on, and after eating it, he fell unconscious for 3 days before waking up. After waking up, the most obvious effect was that his strength had increased greatly. A 10-year-old child's strength was actually comparable to an adult man's. Moreover, as he grew older, the medicinal power hidden in his blood was constantly being absorbed, causing his strength to increase. At this moment, Madame Du also realized that something was wrong. Under Madame Du's questioning, the siblings told her what had happened. Madame Du did not know if she should feel regret or rejoice, but she also realized that this matter must not be leaked. However, the fact that Du Jialoa's strength had increased greatly could not be concealed either. Thus, there was the saying that Du Jialoa was born with divine strength. As for the fact that the Yinghe sect had sent people to the Du village to test whether the youth in the village could activate his blood, Du Jialoa, who had a limitless desire to become an immortal, naturally wanted to go. Although Madame Du was unwilling, her current strength was not enough to help Du Jialoa test and activate his blood. Furthermore, the abnormality of Du Jialoa's physical body could not be seen by anyone who was not a master of alchemy. This was also because Madame Du was hoping to get lucky and did not want Du Jialoa to give up on the idea of becoming an immortal. Unexpectedly, the cultivator who had presided over the ceremony for the youth in the Dew village to activate his blood happened to be the Ying-He sect's master of alchemy, Kai Zhenfeng. He had discovered the abnormality in Du Jialuo's blood and reported this news to the sect's Dharma adept, Chang-He Laozu. As the refining of the human core required the blood to be full of vitality, this meant that Du Jialuo's blood had to be extracted before he died. Otherwise, the effects of the blood would be completely lost. Although Chang-He Laozu's level of practice had reached the peak of the early Dharma stage, he was not ready to break through to the early Dharma stage yet. As such, he had instructed Kai Zhenfeng to keep this a secret and let Du Jialuo grow freely for the time being. However, Chang-He Laozu could not wait too long. This was because as Du Jialuo grew, the effects of the blood in his body would gradually be absorbed by his body. In the long run, the effects of the human core refined would be greatly reduced. As such, Chang-He Laozu was not willing to wait any longer after preparing for 2 years. This time, Kai Zhenfeng had sent Kai Yun to treat Madame Du's illness in order to find an opportunity for Du Jialuo to voluntarily leave the Ying-He sect. However, the final development of the situation was unexpected. Not only did they lose a large number of blood condensation adepts, even a few core forging adepts were injured. Kai Zhenfeng's high-grade alchemy furnace and mid-grade earth-level heaven-earth spirit fire had also become the Samling's spoils of war. Lu Ping looked at Madame Du, who was standing below him. He thought for a moment and said, "Actually, it's not impossible to activate that kid's blood." Madame Du raised her head and looked at Lu Ping, as if she wanted to see if Lu Ping was speaking the truth from his eyes. However, Lu Ping's deep gaze was like a deep pool of water. Madame Du could not see any clues from Lu Ping's expression. She could only ask, "Is what you said true?" On the side, De Bao saw that Madame Du actually dared to question Lu Ping's decision and said in dissatisfaction, "Woman, you're being unreasonable. You should know that my boss is a Grandmaster alchemist. If he says your son's bloodline can be awakened, then it can be awakened." Madame Du's eyes lit up when she heard that Lu Ping was a Grandmaster in alchemy. However, Lu Ping saw a trace of hesitation in her eyes. He stopped De Bao and said, "Consuming a spirit item that strengthens one's body does not mean that he can't perform the bloodline activation ceremony. It just makes it more difficult. However, performing the bloodline activation ceremony does not mean that he can detect a suitable bloodline for cultivation. You have to make this clear first." Madame Du hesitated for a moment before nodding. Seeing that Madame Du was so untactful, De Bao could not help but snort coldly again. Lu Ping smiled at De Bao and said, "It seems that she really treats that kid as her son. Her hesitation is not because she does not believe me, but because she is afraid that I will refine her son into a human pill like the cultivators from the Ying-He sect." Madame Du's expression became calm after Lu Ping saw through her thoughts. However, she heard De Bao sneer. When she looked up, she saw that Lu Ping had a box in his hand. At the same time, he instructed De Bao to call Du Jialuo in. Lu Ping opened the box and said, "I'm sure you're aware that there are only a few types of medicinal pellets that can strengthen one's body. Consuming more than 3 of them is a waste. Based on my previous judgment, the spirit fruit your son consumed might be the same one in this box." At this moment, Du Jialuo followed Lu Ping in from outside the stone room. When he saw the azure wood pure jade fruit that Lu Ping opened the box, he was stunned. Lu Ping saw Du Jialuo's expression and smiled at him. "How is it? Have you seen this fruit before?" Madame Du did not wait for Du Jialuo to answer. She suddenly kowtowed again and said sincerely, "Please help to activate Luo's bloodline." Du Jialuo was a little confused at first, but when he saw Madame Du kowtowing to Lu Ping and heard what she said, his mind was in a mess. Could it be that he could activate his bloodline? Didn't the immortals from the Ying-He sect say that he could not activate his bloodline? However, Du Jialuo was a quick-witted person. He immediately kowtowed to Madame Du and said, "Master, please take pity on me and help me activate my bloodline." De Bao looked at the mother and son and chuckled. "Brat, you sure have a good plan. The moment you open your mouth, you want to become my boss disciple. You should know how many cultivators want to become my boss disciple but can't. Brat, you're really dreaming. Lu Ping called the mother and son over and said to Du Jialuo, the reason I am willing to help you activate your bloodline is because I don't want a talented young man like you to lose a chance to become a cultivator. However, you don't have to be too excited. Maybe after the ceremony, the bloodline in your body will not be able to support you to absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth to become a cultivator. At this time, Lu Ping noticed Madame Du's hesitant expression, as if she had something to say to Lu Ping but couldn't due to Du Jialuo's presence. Hence Lu Ping said, De Bao, take this kid out and settle him down. I believe you have all the spirit materials and spirit herbs required for the bloodline awakening ceremony. Go prepare for it first. Once everything is ready, I will personally host his bloodline awakening ceremony. Taking something out of De Bao's hands was no different from cutting his fat. Only Lu Ping could do this. De Bao reluctantly brought Du Jialuo out of the stone room. Only then did Lu Ping ask Madame Du, do you have anything else to say? Madame Du gritted her teeth and said, I hope that you can accept Luo'er as your disciple. I am willing to give you a secret realm from the Yingtian sect. Lu Ping looked at Madame Du in surprise and suddenly smiled. The reason why you were heavily injured and tried to possess a body, was it because of this Yingtian sect's secret realm? Madame Du was not surprised that Lu Ping could guess what she was thinking. She nodded and said, That's right. After I discovered this secret realm, I was ambushed by the cultivators from the Yinghe sect. Although I managed to hide the traces of the secret realm, my physical body was destroyed in the end. I could only use my gold core to escape and possess a body. This secret has been hidden in my heart for 10 years. If you can accept Luo'er as your personal disciple, I am willing to tell you the location of this Yinghe sect's secret realm. Lu Ping looked at Madame Du and said calmly, Although I do not have a disciple to inherit my legacy, I have my own standards for choosing disciples. Although the Yingtian sect's secret realm is tempting, it cannot be used as a bargaining chip to become my disciple. Looking at the disappointed Madame Du, Lu Ping said, If Du Jialuo has the potential to become a cultivator after activating his bloodline, I can make the decision to let him become a 4th-generation disciple of our sect. However, whether he can become my disciple depends on whether he has the qualifications. As for the Yingtian sect's secret realm that you mentioned, my sect is indeed interested. However, if you do not want to tell me, I will not force you. In the future, when Du Jialuo's cultivation is successful, I will treat it as his opportunity and let him explore it on his own. Chapter 637. The Yingtian sect was a famous sect in the past, and had almost unified the entire mountain range. The lone peak of the heavenly mountain was merely the location of the Yingtian sect's headquarters. Lu Ping did not find it strange that the Yingtian sect had set up several heritage mystic realms in this mountain range. After all, a large sect like the Jinling sect would not put all their eggs in one basket. As for the 3 sects that were established in this mountain range, they had actually started to grow after discovering the Yingtian sect's inheritance secret realm thousands of years ago. What puzzled Lu Ping was that after thousands of years of exploration, apart from Yingtian sect's dojo, there was actually a mystic realm in this mountain range that had been passed down without being discovered by anyone. While Lu Ping was amazed at the Du clan's luck in discovering the Yingtian mystic realm, he was also surprised at the Yingtian sect's rich heritage. Under the Ying River, Lu Ping once again swam up the river with the jade water moon pearl hanging above his head. He headed towards the source of the Yingtian sect's training grounds. Lu Ping swam upstream from the bottom of the Ying River instead of flying towards the source of the river from the sky. This was to hide his tracks. After all, the 3 sects in this mountain range all had the existence of Laozu. De Bao and Lu Ping were still standing within the protective shield. Now that De Bao's cultivation level had increased, his fear of water was no longer as obvious. Boss, are you really going to perform the bloodline activation ritual for that kid? What if his bloodline is unable to reach the standard of cultivation after the activation? Wouldn't it be a waste? That kid's body is as strong as a magic weapon. To activate his bloodline, we will need to spend a lot of spiritual materials and elixirs. DeBeo seemed to still be brooding over the fact that he had wasted so many cultivation resources to activate Du Jialuo's bloodline. Lu Ping said nonchalantly, "Even though it is several times more difficult to activate, it is nothing to us." Seeing that Lu Ping did not understand his meaning, DeBeo said, "Boss, don't tell me you are not interested in that kid's bloodline? That is a mortal core that can strengthen the body." Unlike human cultivators, Yao cultivators did not feel too disgusted by the act of devouring their own kind. It was simply the law of the jungle. This was a common occurrence among the Yao race. And that was because DeBeo was the one asking the question. Thus, he had learned to be tactful. If it were the Samling, he would probably be even more direct. Lu Ping smiled and said, "First of all, this brat's bloodline doesn't mean much to me. I've already taken the golden firmament pill and the bone-forging pill. I also have a golden firmament fruit tree, an azure wood pure jade fruit, a 9-segment white jade lotus root, and 6 9th-grade white jade lotus seeds. Furthermore, celestial phenomenon Lao Tzu once said that this kind of person who is born with a strong body, or rather, before they started cultivating, after entering the world of cultivation, as long as their talent is not too bad and they are hardworking in their cultivation, as long as they do not die prematurely, they will be able to break through to the Dharma stage. If we can take him in as a disciple of Zhenling, our sect may have another Dharma adept in the future." DeBeo twitched his mouth and said, "Boss, if that kid had met someone else, there is a high chance that he would be like the Yinghe sect and kill him to refine the elixir. After all, cultivating that kid into a Dharma adept would take a lot of time and resources, and there is no guarantee of success. But if he were to kill him on the spot to refine the elixir, he might be able to become a mid-Dharma adept in the future." Lu Ping smiled and did not speak. DeBeo asked again, "Boss, when do you plan to take a look at the secret territory of the Ying Tian sect that the Du clan mentioned?" Even though Lu Ping did not accept the Du clan's conditions, the Du clan still told Lu Ping the location of the secret territory in order to repay Lu Ping for saving her family. Lu Ping naturally would not be unreasonable and promised that a portion of the treasures obtained from the secret territory would be left to Du Jialuo and her daughter, the little fox demon. Lu Ping thought about it and said, "Let's go to the source of the Ying River first, and see if we can open the Ying Tian temple again." The Ying Tian secret territory that the Du clan mentioned could not be discovered for so many years, so it should not be easily discovered this time either. After the trip to the Ying Tian temple of the various sects in the North Sea is completed, we will then go to the secret territory with Uncle Jiang and the others. At the source of the Ying River, Lu Ping filled the earthen jar that looked gray and dull on the outside, but was actually a spiritual Dharma treasure, with water from the source of the Ying River. Then, he placed it into the groove. A day later, the sacrificial altar trembled once again as the spatial door opened. Lu Ping and DeBeo quickly entered the spatial door. Then, the spatial door disappeared once again, and the gray earthen jar disappeared without a trace. Once again, they arrived at the space of the Ying Tian temple. Everything inside was not much different from the last time Lu Ping had arrived. This time, Lu Ping was not in a hurry to find weak restrictions that he could break. Instead, he began to size up the various areas in the Ying Tian temple that were covered by restrictions. He memorized the distribution of the various areas in the Ying Tian temple, as well as the strength of the restrictions. This would be of great use to Zhenling when he explored the Ying Tian temple with the various sects in the North Sea. The Ying Tian temple was actually distributed in concentric circles. In the middle, there was a grand hall that was covered in a thick layer of rainbow restrictions. When Lu Ping used the 3 pure ones to observe from the periphery, he discovered that the surface of the grand hall was covered in 7 rainbow restrictions. A total of 49 beams of light were circulating on the surface of the grand hall. The increase in the number of rainbow restrictions was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. If Lu Ping and his subordinates worked together, they could destroy 1 rainbow restriction. However, if 2 rainbow restrictions covered the same area, then even if Lu Ping and the others' strength was doubled, they would not be able to open it. Looking at the 7 rainbow restrictions in the distance, Lu Ping could not help but feel a little speechless. He did not know if the 10 early Dharma laws Laozu from the North Sea would be able to open this grand hall if they worked together. Surrounding and protecting this central grand hall were 3 smaller buildings that were covered in 6 rainbow restrictions. Unfortunately, just like the central grand hall, Lu Ping still could not clearly see what these 3 grand halls were used for. However, as the Yingtian Temple was the most important inheritance ground of the Yingtian sect, there was no doubt that these 4 grand halls stored the most important inheritance manuals of the Yingtian sect. After that, it was not just the buildings that were covered by the 5 rainbow restrictions. In this area, Lu Ping saw a total of 4 buildings. There should be 6 areas covered by the 4-colored restriction, and 9 areas covered by the 3-colored restriction. However, one of them had already been broken, leaving only a remnant of the restriction light. Under the cover of the entire Yingtian Dojo's formation, it was still emitting a faint light. It was likely that this restriction had been broken by ancestor Qin Jian back then. There should be 12 buildings with 2 restrictions, but 5 of them had already been broken. This must have been done by Qin Jian Laozu back then. The remaining areas were the outermost areas that were only covered by 1 restriction. Because these areas had weaker restrictions, they had been more thoroughly broken by Qin Jian Laozu back then. Lu Ping could not tell how many areas there were in total. Previously, when Lu Ping broke through the 5 areas that were only covered by 1 array formation, he also found them in the gaps between areas that were covered by 2 or 3 array formations. From this, it could be seen that Qin Jian Laozu was really not good at breaking restrictions. Otherwise, with his early Dharma stage strength, even if his strength was not considered too strong among the practitioners of the same level, he should not have only obtained such a result in the Yingtian Temple. After memorizing the distribution and strength of the restrictions in the various areas of the Yingtian Temple, Lu Ping once again carefully explored the temple. Other than the spirit herbs that De Bao had found, he had extracted another piece of growing soil from the soil where the spirit herbs were growing. Including the 3 pieces from before, he did not even have enough growing soil. After thinking about it, Lu Ping turned the growing soil into powder again and scattered it into the spirit herb garden in the gold house. Other than that, Lu Ping and De Bao did not find anything else. Feeling helpless, Lu Ping could only focus his attention on the 7 areas that were covered by the 2 rainbow restrictions. With a wave of his hand, he summoned Sam Ling and the rest out of the gold house. De Bao said excitedly, "Boss, are we going to break the areas covered by the 2 restrictions?" Lu Ping opened a treasure box that he had obtained previously from his storage ring and took out a talisman. The talisman shone with 5 different colors. It was the 5-colored restriction-breaking talisman that Lu Ping had obtained. Lu Ping checked the 7 areas covered by the 2 restrictions. In the end, he found a building that looked like a loft. Lu Ping tried to make a few hand seals to break the restrictions, but he could only barely extinguish the 2 colorful lights in one of the restrictions. Sam Ling and the rest were about to make their move, but they saw Lu Ping stretch out his hand. The restriction-breaking talisman in his hand flew up and turned into a 5-colored ray of light that swept across the area. In an instant, it wiped out the remaining 5 colorful lights in the restriction. Lu Ping secretly felt that it was a pity. If this restriction-breaking talisman was used to break a single restriction, it could break a complete rainbow restriction. Unfortunately, the restrictions here were intertwined and supported by the large formation of the entire Taoist sanctum. Its power was much stronger than ordinary rainbow restrictions. In this way, it was quite difficult for it to work together with Lu Ping's restriction-breaking technique to barely break a rainbow restriction. Lu Ping shouted, and his spiritual pets attacked with all their strength. At the same time, Lu Ping also took out the Qianlu sword and the golden scales sword, displaying 2 kinds of great swordsmanship magic powers. Then he used the 7 treasures Thunder Gourd and a Thunderlight magic power. After the 3 great magic powers were used together, a landslide fell from the sky. This time, De Bao was much smarter. He knew that his strength was the lowest among Lu Ping and the others, so when everyone attacked, he didn't attack together. Instead, he took out the talisman weapon that Lu Ping gave him and held it above his head. Just as Lu Ping's landslide fell from the sky, De Bao suddenly threw out the talisman weapon. With the help of the talisman weapon, the landslide smashed towards the restriction with the force of a thunderbolt. With the help of the talisman weapon, its power was even more powerful than before. With a loud bang, the entire restriction shook, and the pavilion that was covered by the restriction also seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. The power of the landslide was originally weaker than that of the golden scale sword, but with the help of the talisman weapon, the power of this attack was comparable to that of the spirit-nurturing magic treasure, the Qianglu sword. As for the remaining two lights, after Lu Ping took out the natal gentian formation, under the attack of the 12 gentian beads, they were easily smashed into spirit stars that filled the sky. Chapter 638. It's broken! It's broken! Following De Bao's excited roar, Lu Ping and the others destroyed the restrictions covering the pavilion. Lu Ping, on the other hand, looked at the pavilion in front of him with slight surprise. De Bao was very observant. Seeing the surprise in Lu Ping's eyes, De Bao couldn't help but ask carefully, "Boss, is there something wrong?" Lu Ping nodded and said, "Earlier, when we were breaking the restrictions, we were afraid that we would break the pavilion. Now, it seems like we were worrying for nothing. How could such a spirit-nurturing treasure be destroyed so easily?" De Bao looked at the pavilion in surprise and said, "A spirit-nurturing treasure? Boss, are you talking about this pavilion?" This was a pavilion that was 28 feet tall. The pavilion's design was unique, and it was divided into 8 sides. Each side was 18 feet long. The pavilion had a total of 8 floors, and each floor was about 10 feet tall. Lu Ping looked at the entrance of the pavilion. There was a 3-foot-long plaque with the words, Baiyang Pavilion, written on it. Presumably, this was the name of the pavilion. However, a large spatial treasure like the Baiyang Pavilion could not be refined like the flowing sword or the multicolored cloud robe, which were spirit-nurturing treasures, and could not be directly refined with true essence. Inside these spatial treasures, there was often a stone tablet that served as a key part of the treasure. As long as one could completely refine it and control it, then it could be used by a cultivator. Lu Ping looked at this huge treasure. If he wanted to know the function of this spirit-nurturing treasure, he would first have to completely control it. "Let's go in and take a look first." Lu Ping took the lead and walked into the Baiyang Pavilion. Sam Ling and the others followed behind. After entering the first floor of the Baiyang Pavilion, everyone felt as if they had entered a golden world. The entire world was filled with a desolate aura. Lu Ping's divine sense swept out, covering almost the entire space. He smiled and said, "They're here!" Before anyone could sense anything, they saw a bright light suddenly flash in the sky. The light flashed in front of them, and countless flying swords emitted a cold light, almost blocking the vision of Lu Ping and the others. A sound of flowing water that seemed to have existed since the beginning of time resounded through the world. A flying sword that looked like water hovered above Lu Ping's head, scattering countless sword rays in the sky. The sword rays formed a torrent of swordsmanship above everyone's heads, shattering the golden flying swords that were raining down from the sky. At the same time, the waves seemed to wipe away the scene in front of everyone. An ordinary pavilion space once again appeared in front of everyone. Lu Ping looked towards the center of the pavilion, and saw a square table engraved with runic patterns on the ground. In the middle of the square table was a fist-sized golden stone hovering in the air above the table. De Bao's eyes lit up, and he said, "Mystic high-grade metal type Fey." As he spoke, he walked towards the square table, wanting to take it down. But then, he felt a tug on his back. He turned around and saw Lu Ping grabbing his collar. "Don't touch that thing for now." Lu Ping turned and walked to the side of the pavilion. Everyone then saw a staircase that led to the second floor. De Bao was a little indignant and said, "Why can't I touch it?" However, he still followed Lu Ping and walked quickly to the second floor. After entering the second floor from the staircase, everyone felt as if they had entered a forest. The dense forest covered the sky, making it difficult to tell the direction. As they walked, countless vines and wooden thorns shot out from all directions, catching them off guard. However, with Lu Ping as the center, a scarlet flame suddenly burst forth. Lu Qing'er transformed into her original form and let out a long cry. She flapped her wings, and a flame also rushed out. At the same time, a gust of wind came to help the fire burn. The surrounding forest was quickly turned to ashes under the burning of the earth high-grade spirit fire. The second floor of the pavilion was also revealed. On the table in the center, there was also a piece of mystic high-grade spirit wood floating in the air. This time, De Bao also saw some clues. It seemed that the attacks on each floor of the 8th scenic pavilion were related to this fae. However, De Bao still smiled and said, "Boss, although this 8th scenic pavilion is a spirit-nurturing grade treasure, we passed through too easily. Is it because the faes on the first 2 floors are all mystic high-grade?" Lu Ping shook his head and said, "Although the tests on each floor are related to the fae in the center, the most important thing is that this treasure is currently in an ownerless state. It can only rely on its instincts to stop us. Otherwise, it would not have been so easy for us to pass through the first 2 floors." As they spoke, everyone had reached the 3rd floor. Looking at the endless sea in front of them, and then looking at the beach that was constantly being washed by the seawater, De Bao was a little frightened and said, "Boss, this level should be easy too, right? You are the water sword immortal." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a white line gradually rising from the horizon. It seemed to be moving slowly, but it was actually very fast. Lu Ping looked at the giant wave that had turned into a 10-meter-tall wave. He smiled and said, "The power of this level is indeed a lot stronger. It must be a low-grade earth-grade fae." De Bao was about to ask Lu Ping if he was confident in breaking through it, but he saw Lu Ping jump into the sea and disappear. De Bao was stunned. When he turned to look, he saw 3 more figures jump into the water and disappear. If it wasn't Samling, who else could it be? De Bao immediately reacted and shouted, "Dague, wait for me." However, what he heard was Lu Dague's silly laughter, and a huge tortoise also sank to the bottom of the sea. Amidst the laughter, Lu Qing'er and Zilan also flew up into the sky, leaving only De Bao alone on the beach. He watched as the giant wave came closer and higher. De Bao also wanted to fly up, but just as he was about to use the vital energy in his body, he discovered that flying was forbidden in this space, and with De Bao's strength, it was impossible for him to break through the shackles of this restriction. For Lu Qing'er and Zilan, flying was their talent. As long as they changed back to their original forms, the restriction would not work on them. De Bao wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He saw that the giant wave was close to him. As long as the wave fell, De Bao and the beach under his feet would be swept into the sea forever. De Bao made up his mind, closed his eyes, and shouted, "Boss, help!" However, after a long time, the feeling of being hit by the giant wave did not come. Instead, he heard a burst of laughter. De Bao stood up and opened his eyes. He saw that he was standing on the floor of a loft, and Samling and the others were laughing around him. Lu Ping stretched out his hand, and there was a drop of water spinning in his palm. Lu Ping dripped the drop of water from his hand, and it once again floated above the table in the center. Lu Ping clapped his hands and said, "Let's go!" The 4th floor of the loft was hot. When they came in, they stood on a desert. De Bao wiped the sweat off his head and said, "Boss, what spirit item is it this time?" Lu Ping naturally did not care about the heat. On the contrary, he was surprised and stamped his feet. A clear spring emerged from the desert, and the hot weather instantly cooled down. As the number of clear springs increased, the illusion of the desert also disappeared. When they reappeared on the 4th floor, De Bao saw that the square table in the center was empty, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "Why are there no spirit items this time?" Lu Ping said, "If there is a spirit item to suppress it, this will not be so easy." On the 5th floor of the loft, everyone looked at the endless plain. Lu Ping said calmly, Let's go! Everyone had just walked a few meters on the plain when DeBeo seemed to have discovered something. He said, "Something is wrong. Hide!" One by one, everyone left their original positions. When they turned their heads to look, they saw a sharp stone all suddenly rising from the ground where they had been standing. When Lu Ping heard DeBeo's shout, he also felt something was wrong. A bluish-purple disk suddenly appeared under his feet. Then, Lu Ping's feet shook. Before the stone all could spit out from the ground, it was blocked by Lu Ping's feet. At this moment, DeBeo, who had just dodged the stone all's sneak attack, shouted again. "Hide! Hide! It's coming again!" The stone all on the ground kept stabbing out from where everyone was standing. Despite DeBeo's constant reminder, there were still people who could not dodge in time. DeBeo simply rolled on the ground and transformed into his original form, allowing the stone all to stab his back. Lu Qiner wanted to fly into the air, but a huge suction came from the ground, making Lu Qiner's weight seem to have increased several times. In the case of not being able to use flying escape, even her flying talent could not get rid of the gravitational force of the ground. Lu Ping looked at the scene of the spirit pets under his hands in a mess. He smiled helplessly. He stretched out his hand and pointed to the storage ring. A blue stream of water turned into a wave and rotated around Lu Ping. Lu Hai saw clearly that this wave of water was Lu Ping's promise to let him smelt 3 portions of low-grade earth-stepped Senglan water when he advanced to the middle stage of core forging. Lu Ping pushed the wave out of his body. The small wave suddenly turned into a monstrous wave, and the wave continued to spread. After a while, it turned into an overwhelming flood, spreading towards the wilderness on all sides. The art of vast seas and mulberry fields. This was the most difficult great magical power to practice in the North Sea's 12 orthodox techniques. It was also the spell that Jiang Tianlin Laozu had highly evaluated in the past. After Lu Ping's cultivation advanced to the middle stage of core forging, he finally had a small success in it. The flood swept towards the plains. In just a moment, this boundless wilderness became a boundless country of water. This time, Degui finally returned to its kind nature. Degui turned into its original body and floated on the water. On the huge tortoise shell were DeBeo, Lu Qiner, and the others. Suddenly, there was a rumbling sound from the sea. The distant sea suddenly sank, as if the seabed had collapsed. Lu Ping smiled slightly and put away a jade bowl in his hand. The flood that filled the sky suddenly returned to the jade bowl and turned back into Senglan water. The previous wilderness also turned back into an ordinary pavilion. On the wooden table in the center, a black stone was suspended in the air. It seemed to have an inexplicable attraction, making people want to walk into it. Chapter 639. High-grade earth step, magnetic absorbing stone. DeBeo exclaimed. "Boss, leave this treasure for me. When I advance to the late core forging stage, I must smelt this spirit object." DeBeo had been reading all kinds of books and records about the cultivation world that Lu Ping had found for him. His knowledge and vision had greatly increased. Although he was limited by his experience, and his knowledge had not increased by much, he gradually showed that he was knowledgeable, which made the other spirit pets of Lu Ping admire him. The magnetic absorbing stone was an extremely rare earth attribute spirit object in the cultivation world. Although it was only a high-grade earth step spirit object, it had 2 characteristics that made it very popular among cultivators who practiced earth attribute spells. The first characteristic was similar to the Xianyuan heavy water that Lu Ping had smelted. It could greatly increase the density of a cultivator's Xianyuan. Of course, the amount of increase was far from comparable to the Xianyuan heavy water, but even so, it was still quite amazing. The second characteristic was similar to the gravitational force that restrained Lu Qiner's flight. Through this characteristic of the magnetic absorbing stone, after smelting this spirit object, cultivators could practice a magical power called the moving mountain technique. This magical power was actually the same as the spell contained in the talisman weapon in DeBeo's hand. After listening to DeBeo's general explanation, Lu Linger jumped out to attack DeBale. She said, "Fatty Bao, with your laziness, you are only preparing to smelt a high-grade Mystic Step black jade stone when you advance to the mid-core forging stage. I'm afraid you will need the help of Father's minor forging spirit pill. Even so, you still want to smelt a high-grade Earth Step spirit object when you advance to the late core forging stage. I think it will be difficult for you to smelt this spirit object when you advance to the gold core forging stage." Hearing this, DeBale flew into a rage. His fat face turned red. He said, "Little Linger, don't talk nonsense. When did I not cultivate hard? Just you wait, I will definitely smelt this magnetic absorbing stone when I advance to the late core forging stage." Lu Linger showed a disdainful expression and said, "Tang Bao, I'd be a fool to believe you. Besides, did Father agree to smelt this treasure for you?" DeBale was stunned. He looked at Lu Ping with a hint of pleading in his eyes. Lu Ping smiled and said, "If you are qualified, do you think I can stop you?" DeBale was overjoyed and proudly showed off to Lu Linger. Lu Linger curled her lips and said, "What's there to be proud of? Let others see you as if you can smelt high-grade Earth-class spiritual items." Lu Ping knew that Lu Linger was deliberately provoking DeBale. But at this time, it was about time, so he smiled and said, "Okay, it's time to go up to the 6th floor. It seems that the 8th scenic building is a good place for training. Although it is a bit weak for me, it is suitable for you. It seems that after obtaining this treasure, I will have to put you all in seclusion for a period of time." Big Treasure rolled his eyes and said, "Boss, now that there is no one controlling this artifact, the difficulty of each level will naturally be greatly reduced. Moreover, the Fays stored on each floor are of different grades. I think the higher the grade of the Fey, the more difficult the trial scene that can be triggered." Lu Ping looked at DeBale and said, "You mean to say that after obtaining this treasure, the trial's threshold will be greatly increased?" DeBao smiled and said, "That's for sure, but it's up to you to decide which position to set the trial's threshold." As soon as everyone entered the 6th floor's environment, they were blown by a strong wind and couldn't open their eyes. However, such an environment made Lu Qiner and Lu Bai's eyes light up. Invisible wind blades swept towards everyone, but Lu Ping didn't make a move. Lu Qiner's hands turned into a pair of wings and fiercely flapped in the direction of the wind. There were also countless invisible wind blades, but they were blowing in the opposite direction. A few meters in front of everyone, 2 wind blades collided with each other. A series of air explosions sounded, and many wind blades were annihilated after the collision. However, there were still many wind blades that weren't annihilated flying towards everyone. Lu Bai shook the spirit whip in her hand and made a circling motion around her body. A wind wall suddenly formed along with Lu Bai's spirit whip, protecting everyone in the wind wall. One after another, the invisible wind blades crashed into the wind wall. Like countless fish falling into the water, they disappeared in an instant. Lu Ping nodded slightly, and his eyes shone with green light. He carefully observed his surroundings, but he didn't find anything, so he swept his divine sense. Only then did his expression change. He took 2 steps sideways and reached out with his hand. The whole world suddenly became calm. Then, the whole world was quickly torn apart, and everyone was once again returned to the pavilion. Lu Bai looked at Lu Ping anxiously, but saw that Lu Ping's palm was slightly raised, as if there was something in his palm. However, when she looked at it, it was clearly empty. Seeing everyone's curiosity, Lu Ping said, "Feel it with your divine sense." Everyone suddenly understood and used their divine sense to explore Lu Ping's palm. However, after a while, everyone frowned because they found that the thing in Lu Ping's hand was faintly discernible even in their divine sense. This is called the Feather of the Storm. It is a middle-grade Earth-step spirit object. It is produced in the wind and usually drifts with the wind. It is an extremely rare spirit object. Looking at Lu Bai's expectant face, Lu Ping smiled and said, "This spirit object is very suitable for Bai when she advances to the mid-stage core forging realm in the future." When Lu Bai heard Lu Ping's words, she knew that Lu Ping had agreed to give her this most suitable spirit object, so she quickly said with joy, "Thank you, Father." Lu Ping turned to look at the stairs leading to the 7th floor and said, "Let's go to the 7th floor and have a look. I think it should be a world of ice and snow. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, ice, these were the 7 major attributes of the cultivation world. Previously, everyone had passed through the illusion of 6 of these attributes, so the last one must be an illusion of ice and snow." Lu Linger took the lead and stepped into the 7th floor, and then everyone followed. However, to everyone's surprise, although the 7th floor was still an illusion of heaven and earth, it was not a world of ice and snow. Feeling the slight chill, Lu Linger said with some disappointment, "How can this be called a world of ice and snow? At most, it is only the bleakness of late autumn." Lu Ping laughed and said, "It seems that the ice attribute spirit object used to suppress the illusion of the 7th floor is either too low in grade, or there is no such thing at all." A green light flashed in Lu Ping's eyes, and then he went straight to a place, stretched out his hand, and with a "pa" sound, it was as if he had slapped on a wooden table. The world in front of them shattered, and everyone returned to the pavilion. At this time, Lu Ping was standing next to the wooden table in the center of the pavilion. On the wooden table that was engraved with runes, there was really no ice attribute spirit object floating on it, which made Lu Linger very frustrated. After everyone entered the Buying Tower, they killed all the way from the 1st floor to the 7th floor. With the help of Lu Ping, it could be said that they were almost irresistible. Seeing that there was no harvest on the 7th floor, De Bao hurriedly urged everyone to quickly go to the 8th floor, so that they could see the true face of the Buying Tower. It was too late to stop them, and everyone had already gone to the 8th floor. Lu Ping looked at everyone disappearing at the staircase of the 8th floor, and he helplessly smiled and muttered to himself, "Forget it, these people have always been bold and unscrupulous. I will let you taste some pain." After saying that, Lu Ping deliberately slowed down his pace, and walked step by step towards the 8th floor. De Bao, Lu Qiner, and Lu Linger, the 2 impatient people, led everyone all the way to the 8th floor. When they turned around, they saw that Lu Ping did not follow them in, and their hearts suddenly made a thump sound. Then they heard an earth-shattering thunder in the sky, and when they looked up, they did not know when the sky had suddenly become densely covered with thunderclouds, as if the black mass was hovering above everyone's head. In the black clouds there was a burst of flickering, followed by a muffled thunder that resounded through the world, and then a thunderbolt smashed down on everyone's head. De Bao hurriedly said, "Let's work together to resist it." After that, everyone gathered around Lu Dague. They heard Lu Dague's low roar, and a tortoiseshell like a dome enveloped everyone in it. The rest of the people took action, each injecting their own jinqi into the tortoiseshell. The thunderbolt in the sky fell on the tortoiseshell, and the whole black-gray tortoiseshell trembled. If it were not for the help of others' jinqi, Lu Dague would have almost been hit by the thunderbolt, and sat on the ground. However, the dark clouds in the sky were getting thicker and thicker, and thunder and lightning fell from the dark clouds one after another. This time, not only Lu Dague, but also Sam Ling and Lu Qiner, who had the highest cultivation, felt that their jinqi was consumed, and they gradually could not hold on. This time, De Bao finally understood what was going on. It was impossible for Lu Ping to not enter the 8th floor after such a long time. The only possibility was that everyone did not listen to Lu Ping's command, and rushed into the 8th floor. Obviously, Lu Ping wanted to make everyone suffer a little, so that they would remember. After understanding the reason, De Bao suddenly shouted, "Boss, help, we know we were wrong." After De Bao shouted, the other 2 naughty people like Lu Qiner and Lu Ling reacted first, and hurriedly apologized, asking Lu Ping to quickly help, otherwise they would be struck into charcoal. Lu Ping, who had already entered the attic, was actually hiding on the side. After seeing everyone learn a lesson, he released the 7 treasures thunder gourd from the core space. The 7 treasures thunder gourd flew straight into the clouds, and a 7-colored lightning flashed in all directions. The lightning in the dark clouds was immediately suppressed. In fact, when Lu Ping entered the 8th floor, the flashing lightning in the sky caused a reaction from the 7 treasures thundergourd in Lu Ping's core space. Lu Ping thought about the first 7 floors of the Baiyang Tower. Each floor had a different attribute of the world, and the last floor was a world of lightning. The 7 treasures thundergourd also had different attributes of the world as its foundation, and finally gave birth to the power of lightning. Could it be that the two were related? When Lu Ping entered the 8th floor, even though he hid himself, the lightning in the sky was still aimed at him. But at this moment, the 7 treasures thundergourd in Lu Ping's core space shook. For some unknown reason, the lightning that was originally aimed at Lu Ping seemed to hesitate, and in the end, it didn't strike down on Lu Ping. After Lu Ping released the 7 treasures thundergourd, the entire thundercloud was suppressed. Countless lightning flashed with the 7 treasures thundergourd as the center, forming a 7-colored lightning net. The giant net withdrew, and the 7 treasures thundergourd fell back into Lu Ping's hands. The dark clouds in the sky also disappeared, and De Bao and the others let out a sigh of relief. Then, they saw Lu Ping standing not far away from them. Lu Ping reached out with his hand and drew out a bolt of lightning from the 7 treasures thundergourd into the illusory world. The environment suddenly shattered like a mirror, and after everyone returned to the tower, they all looked at the wooden table in the center. This time, there were no heaven and earth spirit treasures floating on top of the wooden table. Instead, the wooden table was evenly divided into 7 colors, and each color was engraved with mysterious runes. Even with Lu Ping's spiritual force, he couldn't clearly distinguish these runes. On top of the wooden table, there was a small pavilion that looked exactly the same as the real 8 scenic restaurant in the center of the 7-colored wooden table. In this small tower, aside from the 4th and 7th floors that were dark, the other floors were emitting spirit light. This was especially true for the 8th floor, which was flashing with traces of lightning. From time to time, lightning would come out of this small Baiyang Tower. Lu Ping knew that this small pavilion was probably the core of the large mystic treasure. So, he stepped forward and slammed his palm on the roof of the pavilion. A thick layer of bluish-purple true essence instantly covered the entire pavilion's surface. At the same time, the true essence seeped into the interior of the pavilion. Then, Lu Ping's quintessential essence filled the entire first floor of the pavilion. The golden light on the first floor suddenly grew brighter, followed by the 2nd and 3rd floors, which also emitted a rich green and blue light. The 4th floor didn't have a fire attribute spirit object to suppress it, so Lu Ping's true essence refinement was especially fast. The tower only emitted a faint red light. The 5th and 6th floors were a little slower. Obviously, it was because the quality of the spirit objects was relatively higher. However, in front of Lu Ping's vigorous true essence, they didn't last long. After refining the 7th floor, Lu Ping's true essence filled the first 7 floors of the 7 treasures thundergourd. He originally thought it would be the most difficult to refine the 8th floor, but after filling the first 7 floors with true essence, his true essence entered the 8th floor without any hindrance. This surprised Lu Ping. If someone was in the Intian dojo at this time, they would be able to see that as Lu Ping refined the small Baiyang Tower on the 8th floor, the entire Baiyang Tower was also shining brightly with the improvement of Lu Ping's refining level. Just after Lu Ping refined the 8th floor, the small tower on the wooden table suddenly shone brightly, and then disappeared from the wooden table. Everyone looked at Lu Ping, but they saw that Lu Ping's face was calm, and there was no change in him because of the disappearance of the small tower. Just after the small Baiyang Tower on the wooden table disappeared, the entire huge Baiyang Tower suddenly shook. Lu Ping said to everyone, "I have refined the Baiyang Tower. We will go out soon." In the Intian dojo, the Baiyang Tower first shook, and then the entire tower actually rose into the air. Then, it began to slowly shrink. At this time, a few brilliances suddenly emerged from the 8th floor of the tower. The brilliance landed on the ground, and Lu Ping and the others appeared from the escape light. Everyone raised their heads and looked at the shrinking Baiyang Tower. At this time, the Baiyang Tower had shrunk to 8 inches high, and it fell into Lu Ping's palm, occupying exactly the center of his palm. De Bao and the others congratulated Lu Ping on obtaining the treasure. After refining the Baiying Tower, Lu Ping already had some understanding of the Baiying Tower's functions, and he was very happy. Lu Ping pondered for a moment. Although the Baiying Tower was of great help to improve his personal strength, the greatest value of this spirit-nurturing treasure was actually as the foundation for the growth of a sect. The real thing that could maximize the Baiying Tower's value was still Jinling. Lu Ping summoned a spirit fire from the storage treasure. This earth middle-grade spirit fire was forcibly seized by Sam Ling from the overflowing river sect's alchemy master, Kai Jinfeng. Along with it, he had also seized a high-grade alchemy furnace. Lu Ping placed the spirit fire directly into the 4th floor of the tower. It was originally a fire attribute environment. Without the suppression of the spirit fire, it could only transform into a hot desert at most. However, after Lu Ping placed the earth-ranked mid-grade spirit fire into the 4th floor, the entire 4th floor suddenly shone with a dazzling red light. Then, the red light gradually faded away, but the originally dark 4th floor also shone brightly. Lu Ping turned to Lu Linger and asked, "Linger, do you still have an earth middle-grade ice spirit item?" "Ah?" Lu Linger very reluctantly handed over a earth middle-grade ice spirit item to Lu Ping. This spirit item was the double earth middle-grade ice spirit item that Lu Ping had obtained when he killed Ao Wushuang in the deep-sea demon territory. This kind of spirit item was suitable for Lu Linger to refine when she advanced to the mid-core forging realm. Therefore, Lu Ping gave both spirit items to Lu Linger for safekeeping. However, when Lu Linger advanced to the mid-core forging realm, she could at most refine a earth middle-grade ice spirit item. Even so, Lu Linger still reluctantly handed over the other earth middle-grade ice spirit item to Lu Ping. When Lu Ping saw Lu Linger pouting her small mouth, he laughed and received the spirit item. Then, he directly placed it into the 7th floor of the tower. A silver-white cold mist rose from the 7th floor, and suddenly, a light flashed. After Lu Ping placed the ice spirit item, except for the 8th floor, every floor of the tower had a heaven and earth spirit item as a cornerstone. The aura of the entire 8 landscapes tower changed. Lu Ping could clearly feel that the 8 landscapes tower's power had undergone a qualitative change. The 8 landscapes tower's power was mainly reflected in 3 aspects. The first was the quality of the spirit-nurturing treasure itself. The second was whether or not there was a heaven and earth spirit item as a cornerstone. Finally, it depended on the grade of the heaven and earth spirit item. At this time, the 8 landscapes tower already had the first 2 aspects. The third aspect was undoubtedly a function that tested the owner's wealth. Lu Ping did not intend to use all of his wealth to upgrade the 8 landscapes tower. After all, the 8 landscapes tower would be open to all cultivators in Jinling in the future. Right now, it was only for his own use. Therefore, he first used his own spirit items to fill up the 7th floor. Once he returned to Jinling, he would certainly need to extort some high-grade spirit items from Laozu. Chapter 640. Above the altar at the source of the surplus river, the spatial door opened once again. Lu Ping and De Bao walked out from the door. Then, the spatial door closed again, and the grey jar reappeared. Lu Ping took it out from the groove. De Bao was still unwilling to give up. He asked, "Boss, are we not going to try the other forbidden areas? Even if we can't open them, don't you still have a 7-colored restriction-breaking talisman?" Lu Ping said unhappily. "The 7-colored restriction-breaking talisman is only used to break the 2 forbidden areas. Isn't that a huge waste?" De Bao cried out. "There are still 3 areas covered by the 7-colored restriction-breaking talisman. The treasures there are definitely more important than the ones covered by the 2 forbidden areas." Lu Ping couldn't be bothered with this money grubber. He turned into a streak of light and flew towards the mountain range. Behind him, De Bao immediately became anxious. He said, "Hey boss, wait for me. Where are you going? That direction isn't leading back to the cave." Lu Ping wasn't in a hurry. A moment later, De Bao caught up from behind. Looking at the direction Lu Ping was heading in, DeBeo whispered, "Boss, are you going to take a look at that secret realm?" Lu Ping nodded and said, "We've already been here for 13 or 14 days. According to the speed of the Laozu of the Northern Sea sects, unless there were some delays along the way, the Laozu of the various sects would probably be here soon." Lu Ping paused for a moment, then continued, "According to the Du clan, the Yingtian sect's secret realm is very likely to be a Grotto Heaven treasure. With my current strength, if I forcefully take a Grotto Heaven treasure, I can barely take one below the spirit cultivation rank. However, it will definitely cause a huge commotion and attract the attention of the Yinghe, Yingshan, and Dao Space sects Fa Xiang Laozu. Thus, my original plan was to wait for Marshal Uncle Jiang to come and take it. This way, we will definitely be able to avoid the Laozu's eyes and ears." Looking at the slightly disappointed DeBeo, Lu Ping continued, "However, according to the Du clan, that Yingtian sect's secret realm is very likely to be a Grotto Heaven treasure. Based on my current strength, if I were to forcefully take a Grotto Heaven treasure, a spirit cultivation rank or below would be barely enough. However, when the time comes, I will definitely cause a huge commotion and be discovered by the Yinghe, Yingshan, and Dao Space sects Fa Xiang Laozu. Thus, my original plan was to wait for Marshal Uncle Jiang to arrive and have him take it. This way, we will definitely be able to avoid the Laozu's eyes and ears from the various sections." Hearing Lu Ping's words, DeBeo's spirits were immediately lifted. That's right. Right now, that secret space is still ownerless. Naturally, we can do whatever we want with it." As Lu Ping flew, he would often use a spell to leave a few mysterious imprints in a few special corners. These imprints would be imprinted on the trees, on the surface of the rocks, or even on the ground. Lu Ping would even make a few hand seals on the surface of the river and send the imprints into the flowing river, disappearing without a trace. DeBeo asked curiously, "Boss, what are you doing? Why can't I sense the imprints you sent into the rocks or the trees at all?" While flying, Lu Ping sent another imprint into a cloud. Then, he turned his head and said to DeBeo with a smile, "These hand seals are Zhenling's secret communication imprints. Apart from high-level cultivators of Zhenling's direct lineage, it is extremely difficult for ordinary people to discover them. Even if they discover them, they won't be able to understand the meaning behind these imprints." DeBeo understood something and said, "Boss, are you contacting Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, and the others?" Lu Ping nodded and said, "Naturally, the sooner I can contact them, the better. Maybe cultivators from other sects have already arrived. I have to inform Marshal Uncle Tianlin of the situation in the Yingtian dojo as soon as possible so that the other martial uncles and martial uncles can prepare in advance. This way, we can gain the upper hand in the competition with the other sections." The two of them followed the direction that the Du clan had pointed out, and flew all the way to the northeast of the mountain range. After traveling more than 500 kilometers into the mountain range, DeBeo suddenly pointed to the front and said, "Boss, do you think that's the direction that the Du clan mentioned?" Lu Ping looked up and saw a silver-white waterfall hanging down from the mountainside. Although it was still more than 5 kilometers away, the rumbling sounds could already be faintly heard. The two of them descended in front of this huge waterfall. The deafening sound of the water was like the Milky Way descending from the ninth heaven, making it impossible for people to clearly hear other people's words when they looked at it from up close. However, this naturally didn't affect the conversation between Lu Ping and DeBeo. DeBeo looked at the deep pool of water in front of the waterfall and said, "This waterfall can be considered as an exceptionally beautiful scenery in this mountain range. I don't believe that no one has discovered this place before. How could no one have carefully examined the pool of water?" Lu Ping shook his head and said, "This is indeed a place that attracts people's attention. However, it is also because of this that many people believe that the Yingtian sect wouldn't set up their secret realm here. Moreover, this secret realm of the Yingtian sect is quite different from the others, so it managed to deceive countless cultivators over the past thousands of years." DeBeo asked curiously, "What's different about it?" How did the Du clan discover this secret realm? Lu Ping chuckled and said, "Come with me to the mystic realm and take a look. You'll understand soon enough." Without waiting for DeBeo to speak, Lu Ping had already jumped into the pool of water. DeBeo wailed and said, "No way, boss, we still have to enter the water?" However, in the end, DeBeo still couldn't resist the temptation of the secret realm's treasures. He gritted his teeth and jumped into the pool of water. After entering the pool of water, DeBeo immediately saw that Lu Ping was currently holding the jade watermoon pearl above his head. Lu Ping was smiling as he clumsily moved through the water. DeBeo didn't care about anything else and struggled to enter the protective barrier of the jade watermoon pearl. He didn't care about the sorry state of his body and asked Lu Ping, "Boss, where is the secret realm?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "Actually, we have already entered the secret realm." Now? DeBeo looked around in surprise, but discovered that it was still clear water all around. When he looked up, he could even see the huge silver waterfall falling from the sky through the clear and crystalline surface of the pool. "Boss, I feel that we are still in the pool of water and haven't entered the secret realm?" Lu Ping looked at the confused DeBeo and laughed lightly, saying, "Follow me." After saying that, Lu Ping lifted DeBeo's collar and rushed towards the surface of the pool of water above their heads. Although DeBeo was confused, he knew that Lu Ping definitely wouldn't do such a senseless thing. Sure enough, just as the two of them were about to rush out of the water, a green light suddenly flashed in Lu Ping's eyes. Then, as if he had seen something, he stretched out an arm and stirred it upwards. Immediately, a whirlpool was formed that rushed towards the surface of the water. Lu Ping and DeBeo plunged into the whirlpool. In a quiet valley, there was a small lake with a mirror-like surface. At the center of the small lake surface, a whirlpool suddenly appeared. Then, two streaks of light suddenly flew out from the whirlpool. The streaks of light landed by the side of the lake, revealing a 20-year-old cultivator and a slightly short but extremely fat youth with a handlebar mustache. DeBeo looked at the reflection in the lake. It wasn't the surrounding valley, but the silvery white waterfall. He couldn't help but reveal an incredulous expression. After a while, he turned to Lu Ping, who was also examining the surroundings, and said, "Boss, is this the secret realm of Ingtian sect? This is really strange. Why didn't we come out from the pool of water under the waterfall?" Lu Ping ignored DeBeo's question. He had already been completely attracted by the spirit herbs growing all over the mountains and plains of this secret realm. Could it be that the Ingtian sect had really used a secret realm as a cultivation base for spirit herbs? Lu Ping's body slowly rose up and looked into the distance. He saw that the top of the mountain in the distance was emitting rays of light that shot into the sky. At this time, DeBeo had also noticed the strange phenomenon at the top of the mountain in the distance. He immediately said with joy, "Boss, let's go there quickly. That must be an important place in the secret realm." Although Lu Ping's body was floating in midair, he could sense that this secret realm also had a flight restriction. Although he could float in midair, he couldn't fly towards the top of the mountain in the distance. With no other choice, the two of them could only rely on walking towards the top of the mountain in the distance. Fortunately, the two of them were able to walk as if they were flying. Their speed was even faster than a normal person running at full speed. However, when Lu Ping looked at the spirit herbs that covered the mountains and plains, there were many spirit herbs and spirit trees that were blooming with spirit flowers. Lu Ping released the amethyst wasp Queen Zilan from the golden house. Accompanying her was her colony of over 10,000 amethyst wasps. Zilan looked at the blossoming spirit flowers in this secret realm, and immediately cheered. She rode her 1-meter-tall puppet horse and galloped happily towards the wilderness. At the same time, countless amethyst wasps also scattered into this secret realm with a buzzing sound that gradually faded into the distance. Along the way, when Lu Ping saw the mature 3,000-year-old spirit herbs, he couldn't help but stop to collect them. Then, he buried the seeds of the mature spirit herbs back into the ground. With great difficulty, he finally reached the top of the mountain under DeBeo's urging. By then, Lu Ping had already collected over 103,000-year-old spirit herbs. Many of them were rare spiritual herbs that were extremely rare in the world of cultivation. At the top of the mountain was a huge palace. DeBeo's face was filled with hope as he asked, "Boss, what do you think? Is it possible to break the restriction here?" Lu Ping sighed. His hands formed several hand seals in succession and shot towards the palace in front of him. Like flowing water, a swaying restriction barrier suddenly appeared in front of the palace. On the surface of the barrier, a total of 28 colored lights constantly flowed, emitting a psychedelic light. For rainbow-colored restrictions? DeBeo stared at the barrier in front of him, dumbfounded. Then, he became dejected. The 4-colored restrictions were not something they could break unless. Chapter 641. How could Lu Ping not understand DeBeo's meaning when he saw that DeBeo was suddenly looking at him with bright eyes, so he didn't even think about it and said, "Don't even think about using the 7-colored restriction-breaking talisman. Not to mention whether or not we can open it after using it. Even if we do open the barrier here, if we don't quickly subdue it, this Heaven's Cave will definitely lose the support of the illusion from before and will soon be discovered by others. And if I subdue this Heaven's Cave, it will inevitably cause a strong tremor in the entire Heaven's Cave. At that time, I will still be discovered, so we can only wait for Marshal Uncle Jiang to arrive." Lu Ping looked at DeBeo's dejected face and said with a smile, "However, other than this palace, this Heaven's Cave is not without treasures. You call yourself the treasure-seeking mouse. Have you not discovered anything?" DeBeo listlessly looked at the spirit herbs growing around him and said, "Even if there are some precious spirit herbs, there are only 1 or 2 of them. What else can I discover? Moreover, although the spirit herbs in this Heaven's Cave are growing everywhere, the quality of the spirit herbs themselves is not very high. It is obvious that they have been growing on their own for thousands of years without anyone taking care of them. If that Wood Luan Yu was still here, this would be a place he would like to live." When Lu Ping heard DeBeo mention Luan Yu, he couldn't help but be startled. He didn't know how Luan Yu had been following Yan Wujiu and Lao Zu all these years, and whether or not he had found the inheritance of the Wood Luan clan. However, this thought only flashed in Lu Ping's mind for a moment. Then, Lu Ping pointed at a few trees growing at the foot of the back mountain and said to DeBeo, "Do you recognize those trees at the foot of the mountain?" Looking from afar, DeBeo couldn't clearly distinguish the dozen or so trees of different sizes. Lu Ping chuckled and walked towards the dozen or so trees at the foot of the mountain, and DeBeo hurriedly followed. Just when the two were only 300 feet away from the trees, the dozen or so trees suddenly began to sway without any wind. The swaying of the branches produced a whistling sound, as if it had turned into invisible sound waves in the sky, falling towards the heads of Lu Ping and DeBeo. Lu Ping seemed to have been prepared, and with a slight vibration of his enormous divine sense, he shattered the sound waves that were aimed at him. DeBeo didn't have Lu Ping's enormous divine sense, and was also caught off guard. His eyes immediately rolled upwards, and he was about to fall towards the ground with his back to the sky. Lu Ping shook his head slightly, and kicked DeBeo's butt. DeBeo, who was about to fall backwards, immediately pounced forward. Just as he was about to fall flat on his face, his brain quivered, and he immediately became clear-headed. His body staggered a few steps forward, and only then did he manage to stand up with difficulty. Looking at the dozen or so seemingly ordinary trees in front of him, DeBeo asked Lu Ping beside him with lingering fear, "Boss, what kind of spiritual tree is this? Why is it so powerful? Could it be that it has cultivated into a spiritual demon like the little peach tree, and gained intelligence?" Lu Ping fiercely knocked DeBeo's head, and said, "It's already extremely rare for a spiritual demon to appear in this cultivation world. Did you think that we would encounter a dozen or so spiritual demon trees here?" DeBeo knew that he had made a mistake of common sense, and immediately laughed foolishly and said, "Boss, what exactly is this spiritual tree? Please tell me." Lu Ping didn't answer immediately, and instead walked a little closer to the dozen or so spiritual trees. De Bao followed behind Lu Ping with some suspicion, and instantly smelled a familiar fragrance. De Bao's eyes widened, and he said, Why is this so similar to the calming soul incense that you lit the other day, boss? But it's just that the density is a little lighter. Lu Ping nodded and said, That's right. These dozen or so spiritual trees are the famous frightening soul trees in the cultivation world. This kind of frightening soul tree is very sensitive to the approach of life. Once a cultivator or demon beast approaches, it will automatically form a frightening soul sound hoop and cause the cultivator's divine sense to be imprisoned, and they will fall unconscious. De Bao looked at the dozen or so spiritual trees in front of him in astonishment, and said, No way, boss. This is the famous frightening soul tree in the cultivation world? This is the most important ingredient to make the three famous incenses of the cultivation world, soul calming incense, and soul nourishing incense? Lu Ping smiled and said, What, you didn't think of this, did you? These three types of soul incense are famous in the cultivation world, but very few people know that they actually come from the same source. Although each type of soul incense is refined from a variety of different materials, the main material is the frightening soul tree. The main material of the soul-stabilizing incense is the branch of the frightening soul tree, the main material of the soul-calming incense is the trunk of the frightening soul tree, and the most precious soul-nourishing incense is the root of the frightening soul tree. When De Bao heard what Lu Ping said, his eyes lit up as he looked at the dozen or so frightening soul trees. He drooled and murmured to himself, Boss, there are a dozen or so frightening soul trees here, and the youngest one is probably over 1,000 years old. If all of them are used to make the three types of incense, how much wealth would it be? Lu Ping stretched out his foot and made to kick again. This time, De Bao was smart. He quickly took a step forward and avoided Lu Ping's kick. Lu Ping said in a bad mood, If all of them are cut down to make the incense, how many benefits will you get? If these frightening soul trees can be successfully cultivated, won't the benefits be endless? De Bao immediately flattered Lu Ping, patted his chest, and said, Boss is really wise. I, De Bao, can't think of such an idea. If Boss can make the incense, I, De Bao, will help you sell it. What do you think, Boss? Lu Ping glanced at him and said, How many incense do you think we can make? Even if we can make enough incense to satisfy our needs, we can only sell the rest through secret channels. That way, we won't attract the attention of the cultivation world and get the most benefits. De Bao wanted to say something, but Lu Ping grabbed his collar and said, All right. Don't you want to make use of the incense in the future? Now help me move these spirit trees into the golden house. Be careful not to break even a single root. Otherwise, these frightening spirit trees will be damaged, and the quality of the soul incense refined in the future will be greatly reduced. De Bao's expression darkened. But now that he had advanced to the early core forging stage, his strength had improved significantly compared to when he was in the blood condensation stage. He no longer needed to help Lu Ping move something into the golden house. Every time he helped move something into the golden house, he would often faint due to the exhaustion of his magic power. However, the huge roots of these towering trees carried a huge amount of soil, and it was difficult for De Bao to bear. After throwing De Bao, who was exhausted and limp on the ground beside a dozen huge pits, Lu Ping walked towards the other parts of the grotto heaven. He wanted to make the best use of his time and selectively collect the rare spirit herbs in this grotto heaven. Under the guidance of the amethyst bees, who were collecting the nectar of the spirit herbs, Lu Ping found 3 top-grade spirit tea trees in a place with dense spiritual energy. These 3 spirit tea trees were around 5,000 years old, and the spirit tea they collected contained dense spiritual energy. It was far more beneficial to cultivators' cultivation than ordinary top-grade spirit tea. Lu Ping loved tea, and he was extremely picky about the quality of the spirit tea. Every year, he would spend hundreds of thousands of spirit stones on top-grade spirit tea. Lu Ping had also tried to cultivate top-grade spirit tea in the Golden House, but it would take hundreds of years of painstaking cultivation to succeed. Moreover, high-quality top-grade spirit tea seeds that could catch Lu Ping's attention were extremely hard to come by. The discovery of these 3 5,000-year-old spirit tea trees made Lu Ping overjoyed. These 3 spirit tea trees could only produce around 30 taels of top-grade spirit tea in a year, but the enormous spiritual energy contained in these 5,000-year-old spirit tea trees made these 30 taels of top-grade spirit tea as valuable as 30 pieces of soul-nourishing incense. The amethyst queen bee, Zilan, was very busy in the grotto heaven, commanding the huge swarm of bees to speed up the gathering of spirit nectar. She knew that this was a rare opportunity. She didn't know how many years it would be before she would be able to find an entire grotto heaven to cultivate spirit herbs again. If Zilan wanted to advance in her cultivation, the most important thing was not only the accumulation of long-term cultivation, but also the essence of hundreds of flowers that Zilan absorbed during the process of brewing the amethyst royal jelly. Previously, in the secret land of the perished archipelago, Zilan successfully broke through to the core forging stage because of the sea of spirit herbs there. However, the Longhui ancestor had already made it clear that unless there was a large spirit herb garden that had been accumulated for thousands of years for Zilan to command the amethyst queen bees to collect flower nectar in a short period of time, Zilan would no longer have any hope of advancing in her cultivation. The Longhui ancestor's words greatly disappointed Zilan. However, after Zilan had used the sea of flowers in the secret land of the perished archipelago to push her cultivation to the peak of the first layer of the core forging stage. Then, Lu Ping told Zilan that the Jinling sect's Laozu had already agreed to let her collect all of the spirit herbs in the sect's garden. Only then did Zilan see the hope of advancing in her cultivation. However, she didn't expect that this time Lu Ping would directly find a grotto heaven in the secret land of the Yingtian sect that was specially used to cultivate spirit herbs. Although this grotto heaven had already lost the management of cultivators, the entire grotto heaven was growing in a disorderly state. However, this grotto heaven was rich in spiritual energy, and had not been disturbed for thousands of years. The growth of the spirit herbs inside was abnormally dense. Nearly a third of the spirit herbs had reached a medicinal age of more than 1,000 years. After Lu Ping carefully moved a dozen frightening spirit trees and 3 5,000-year-old top-grade spirit tea trees into the House of Gold, another day had already passed. Zilan commanded the swarm of bees and returned to the hive of the House of Gold with an exceptionally happy harvest. Before entering the House of Gold, Zilan excitedly told Lu Ping that she was preparing to go into seclusion. This was because she felt that the nectar that she had collected in the grotto heaven contained the essence of 100 flowers. It was enough for her to successfully advance to the second layer of the core forging stage. Debeo reluctantly returned to the valley where the small lake was located. When he saw that, Debeo still couldn't help but look back at the vast field of spirit herbs in the secret land. Lu Ping kicked Debeo into the lake. After Lu Ping jumped into the lake and met up with Debeo, he didn't stir the lake this time. Instead, he floated straight up. Debeo heard the deafening roar of the waterfall coming closer and closer. When the two of them jumped out of the water again, they had already landed in front of the pool. Debeo looked at Lu Ping and asked, "Boss, where are we going now?" Lu Ping thought for a moment and said, "Let's go back to the cave first." The two of them carefully set up a layer of light. Lu Ping wrapped the multicolored cloud light robe around the layer of light, and the two of them disappeared into the clouds that filled the sky. This time, Lu Ping didn't seem to be in a hurry. Debeo asked, "Boss, today is the 15th day. Laozu and the late core forging stage cultivators from the various sects in the North Sea should have arrived by now. However, we still haven't found Jiang Tianlin and Laozu. What do you think we should do?" Lu Ping seemed to be flying casually, but in fact, his divine sense had been probing the Jinling's inheritance imprints scattered in various areas along the way. When he heard this, he smiled and said, "You forgot that we also know where the Yingtian dojo is. When the time comes, we can just go and find it." Debeo didn't think much of it. When Laozu from the various sects started to open the Yingtian dojo, they would most likely use violent means. At that time, in order to prevent outsiders from spying on them, they would definitely set up a formation to cover and protect the heaven and earth anomaly caused by the opening of the Ingtian dojo. At the same time, they would also send people to patrol the surroundings of the dojo to prevent other cultivators from accidentally entering and discovering the schemes of the various sects in the North Sea. At that time, before Lu Ping could sneak in, he would probably be killed by Laozu from some sects with ulterior motives. Just as the Bao was about to say something, he saw that Lu Ping's expression suddenly became joyful. The Jinling's inheritance imprint that he had set up in one of the clouds had already been left with a similar imprint. The information contained in these imprints could only be understood by the true core elite cultivators of the Jinling sect. After Lu Ping used his divine sense to check the imprint, he waved his hand to disperse the clouds and change the direction of the conveyance light, flying in the opposite direction of the Yinghe Valley. After a few dozen kilometers, Lu Ping passed by the skies above a forest. He suddenly stretched out his hand and pointed at a giant tree beneath his feet. A ball of spiritual light exploded from the surface of a leaf on the top of the giant tree. Lu Ping's divine sense quickly scanned every spirit star before the exploded spiritual light dissipated. Thus, he raised his head to determine the direction and quickly disappeared into the sky once again. Under a cliff, Lu Ping's conveyance light had just landed when he was already enveloped by a vigorous wave of divine sense. At this time, Lu Ping's own divine sense was no longer weaker than that of an ordinary early Dharma adept. However, when this wave of divine sense approached him, a feeling of inferiority welled up in Lu Ping's heart. However, Lu Ping did not panic because the other party's divine sense far exceeded his own. This was because he was very familiar with this wave of divine sense. It was the leader of the second generation of Jinling sect disciples, and could be said to be the true number one person among the second-generation disciples in the entire North Sea cultivation world. It was his teacher's partner, Jiang Tianlin Laozu. After pacing around the cliff for a while, Lu Ping finally saw the path that perfected Xianxin had used a row of cobblestones to guide him. Following the direction of the cobblestones, Lu Ping had just bypassed the obstruction of the formation when he heard Jiang Tianlin Laozu's chuckling voice. "I was just guessing that it was one of the disciples from our sect who had been traveling in the Central Plains. It was as if he had already known that our sect would come to the North Ice Plains and had left his legacy marks everywhere in advance. So it was you, kid. From the looks of it, the marks you left seem to have been left 1 or 2 days ago. Tell me, how did you get to the North Ice Plains before us?" Lu Ping raised his head and saw 5 people sitting together. The leader was Jiang Tianlin Laozu, while the other 4 were perfected Xuanqiu, perfected Xianxin, perfected Xianxin, and perfected Xuanjiu. Before he could answer Jiang Tianlin Laozu's question, Lu Ping was first shocked by perfected Xuanjiu's pale face. This was obviously a sign that he had suffered an extremely serious injury. Chapter 642. In fact, when Lu Ping found this hidden cliff, he had already discovered the intricate array that enveloped the bottom of the cliff. He could also clearly sense that Jiang Tianlin Laozu's divine telekinesis had also discovered him. However, even though Jiang Tianlin Laozu's divine telekinesis had discovered Lu Ping first, it did not bring him into the array. Lu Ping thought about it and understood Jiang Tianlin Laozu's intention. This was to test him on his method of breaking the array. Lu Ping's divine telekinesis instantly covered the entire array. Then, his eyes shone with green light as he carefully examined every detail of the array. However, to Lu Ping's disappointment, although he could clearly see the trajectory of the array, he could not break it without damaging the foundation of the array. Lu Ping thought about it and was about to use Failing Sect's secret forbidden technique when his heart suddenly stopped. Lu Ping had never used this Failing Sect's secret forbidden technique in front of others. The array in front of him was obviously created by the sect's newly promoted array grandmaster, perfected Xianxin. Then, could this not be Tianlin Laozu's idea, but perfected Xianxin himself asking to test Lu Ping? With enlightened Master Xianxin's knowledge and foresight, as long as Lu Ping used Failing Sect's secret forbidden breaking technique, he would be able to break the array formation in front of him. On the other hand, enlightened Master Xianquan's secret technique would also be easily seen through. If it was during normal times, Lu Ping could take this opportunity to pass down the secret technique in Jinling through his teacher. It could also be used to strengthen the position of Zhonghua's lineage in Jinling. However, this inherited secret technique was related to an important secret cultivation plan for Lu Ping in the future, and it could not be known to others yet. In all fairness, even though Lu Ping's divine sense and 3 Pure One's true pupils couldn't completely crack the intricate array formation, it was still possible for him to shatter the array formation with the combination of his skills and spells. But obviously, he couldn't do that right now. In desperation, Lu Ping could only make a helpless expression and quietly wait for the sect senior to bring him into the array. After entering the array along the path that Perfected Xianxin had used the cobblestone to point out, Perfected Xianxin did not ask Lu Ping about the array. Although Lu Ping was surprised, his attention was quickly attracted by the heavily injured Taoist Xianxin. Taoist Xuanxin's face was pale and haggard. It was obvious that he had suffered serious internal injuries. However, after hearing Tianlin Laozu's question, Lu Ping had no choice but to answer first. This disciple has long yearned for the cultivation world of the Central Plains. After the incident on Frost Island, this disciple had wanted to follow senior uncle to the northern ice plains to search for Yingtian Dojo. However, senior uncle Laozu did not allow it. After that, this disciple coincidentally found a super long-distance teleportation formation in Laozu's cave abode that year. This disciple was overjoyed and activated the teleportation formation, but I did not expect to be teleported here. Lu Ping's words were a mixture of truth and lies, and there were many loopholes. However, Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, and the others did not care about this. What they cared about was that Lu Ping was able to clearly inform the sect about this teleportation formation. As for whether or not Lu Ping had reported the teleportation formation after discovering it, in the eyes of Jinling's and Laozu's eyes, it was not important. After all, the teleportation formation was discovered by Lu Ping. It was only natural that he had profited from this teleportation formation. As long as Lu Ping was able to report this matter to Laozu's at a later time, how much he had profited previously was up to his own ability. A secret teleportation formation that connected the North Sea to the border between the Central Plains and the Northern Ice Plains. Although it was a small teleportation formation that could only be used by one person, it was enough to make Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, and the others go wild with joy. The cultivation world of the North Sea and the Central Plains had been isolated for many years. One only needed to know that the disciples of the North Sea could only travel to the Central Plains through the teleportation formations of the East Sea. Furthermore, due to the limited number of spots, only the elite disciples of the late core forging realm were qualified to obtain a spot. Now that there really was a teleportation formation that connected the North Sea to the Central Plains, the significance of this to the rising Jinling was self-evident. Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, and the other 4 perfected masters looked at each other, and they could all see the hidden joy in each other's eyes. However, Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, was the best at maintaining his composure, and he quickly hid his emotions. At the same time, he also guessed the truth of many things through Lu Ping's narration. He smiled and said, "In that case, Qingjian Laozu should also have a cave abode on this side of the teleportation formation." It seems that Qingjian Laozu is not as simple as he seems. Furthermore, from the information revealed by the Blue Sea sect, not only is Qingjian Laozu really the successor of the Yingtian sect, but it is also very likely that he knows the true location of the Yingtian dojo. Lu Ping couldn't help but exclaim in his heart. Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, had always had a carefree and unrestrained image in the sect. However, the intelligence and wisdom that he displayed at this moment made Lu Ping admire him from the bottom of his heart. These Dharma manifestation Laozu, after hundreds of years of cultivation, had been influenced by the deceit of the cultivation world. Which one of them was easy to get along with? Perfected Master Xianxin pondered for a moment and said, "Senior brother, What you mean is that the Ing Tian dojo might have already been taken by someone else? Hearing perfected Master Xian Sen's words, the three perfected masters Xian Su, Xian Zhu, and Xian Qun could not help but look a little disappointed. Jiang Tianlin Laozu laughed and said, "That's not very possible. The Ing Tian dojo is a large and powerful sect in the cultivation world. There are many experts in the sect, and they are even stronger than the Fei Ling sect. Qin Jian Laozu is only an early Dharma adept. Moreover, from the situation when he was being chased by the Tsunghai sect, his strength is not that great. With such strength, even if he is the successor of the Ing Tian dojo, how many of the high-level prohibitions in the Ing Tian dojo can he break?" Jiang Tianlin, Laozu's words made the three Zenrins heave a sigh of relief. Even perfected Master Xian Sen nodded his head in agreement. Lu Ping admired Jiang Tianlin, Laozu's guess very much. The truth was just as he had guessed. In the Ing Tian dojo, Qin Jian, Laozu, had only broken some areas that were covered by 1 or 2 prohibitions, and there was only one area that was covered by 3 prohibitions. Although Lu Ping admired Jiang Tianlin, Laozu's guess and deduction, he still didn't expect that Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, had guessed more than this. Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, looked at Lu Ping, who had a pensive look on his face, and asked with a smile, "The things that Qin Jian, Laozu, obtained from the Ing Tian dojo back then must have been stored in the cave abode that you teleported from. Do you have anything that you don't need to give to the sect?" Lu Ping knew that Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, was reminding him that the biggest taboo in the cultivation world was not to worry about scarcity, but to worry about inequality. Even though these things were obtained by Lu Ping, and even if he didn't use a single thing, no one would say anything, he was still dissatisfied with Lu Ping. This would not be beneficial to Lu Ping's growth in the sect in the future. However, after Lu Ping told everyone about the teleportation array, he was already prepared. After Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, mentioned it, Lu Ping wiped his storage ring, and 3 thick ancient books appeared in his hand. Lu Ping carefully placed the 3 ancient books in front of Jiang Tianlin, Laozu. When everyone saw how solemn Lu Ping was, they were very surprised to see the contents of these 3 ancient books. However, at this time, Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, looked at the 3 ancient books in front of him with a solemn expression. He carefully took the 3 ancient books, opened one of them very gently, and read the contents. After a long time, spiritual master Jiang Tianlin had roughly browsed through the 3 ancient books. Only then did he put the 3 ancient books back together with satisfaction. He sighed and said, "With these 3 ancient books in hand, even if this trip to the Ing Tian dojo is fruitless, it will be worth it." Spiritual Master Xian Su, who was at the side, said in surprise, "Senior brother Jiang, what are these 3 ancient books? Are they really so precious?" Jiang Tianlin Laozu laughed. Seeing that the other 3 were also curious, he explained. "In the cultivation world, other than the Yuan family, which has received the legacy of Ping Laozu, it is said that when the 7th patriarch preached and taught disciples, he passed down a total of 49 paths to the true spirit, corresponding to the 7 attributes and the 7 main bloodlines. Therefore, when measuring the strength of a sect, a very important standard is to see how many complete ancient books they have from the blood condensation realm to the late Dharma realm." At this time, spiritual master Xianchen also asked in surprise, "Senior brother, could it be that junior nephew Lu's 3 ancient books are actually 3 complete ancient books that have been passed down?" Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, smiled and nodded. He said, "Yes, one is called the 4-season cycle technique, which is the most suitable technique for cultivators with the wood attribute Wan bloodline. The other is called the virtuous turtle breathing technique, which is the most suitable technique for cultivators with the water attribute turtle bloodline. The third technique is called the frost cicada technique, which is the most suitable technique for cultivators with the ice attribute cicada bloodline." After Jiang Tianlin finished introducing the 3 techniques, the other 4 spiritual masters were overjoyed. It must be known that Jinling had been passed down for tens of thousands of years, and there were many techniques passed down within the sect. However, there were only 6 complete techniques that could be practiced to the late Dharma stage. Apart from Zhenling's 5 true inheritances, only spiritual master Liang Xianfeng had found the Lihai wave listening technique in the Zhongxian cave abode, which had been passed down to the late Dharma stage for Lu Tianling and Laozu. However, now that he had obtained 3 of them, the complete inheritance of Zhenling's techniques had suddenly increased to 8. It must be known that these 3 techniques were passed down by the Yingtian sect, so there was no doubt about the authenticity of these techniques. Otherwise, they would definitely not have been kept in the Yingtian sect's last and most important inheritance hall. How could this not cause everyone present to be inexplicably excited? The breadth and completeness of a sect's inheritance not only meant that the inheritance was widely accepted by the public, but at the same time, it also meant that more and more talented cultivators could continuously emerge because of the complete inheritance. This was the root of the rise and prosperity of a sect. Chapter 643. Of course, these were not the only things that Lu Ping had gained from the Clear Stream cave abode. Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, and the others were naturally aware of this as well. However, these 3 complete cultivation manuals had undoubtedly greatly strengthened their weakest shortcoming for the rising Zhenling. Seeing that the seniors had calmed down from the joy of obtaining these 3 cultivation manuals, Lu Ping thought for a moment and said, "Martial uncles and martial uncles, this disciple still has some news regarding the Yingtian dojo to report. I'm going to ask you even if you don't say it." Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, smiled and said, "You were able to obtain the Clear Stream cave abode, and Clear Stream Laozu had obviously entered the Yingtian dojo before. Then, he must have some information regarding the Yingtian dojo." This time, Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, did not guess correctly. However, he would never have thought that Lu Ping had already entered the Yingtian dojo twice. Lu Ping chuckled and said, "This disciple has already found the Yingtian dojo and entered it twice. Today, when this disciple discovered the inheritance imprint left behind by the martial uncles and martial uncles, I had just come out of the Yingtian dojo." "What?" This time, the spiritual masters of Zhenling finally cried out in surprise. Even Jiang Tianlin, Laozu, looked at Lu Ping in surprise. Spiritual Master Xianchen asked again in disbelief, "You really found the Yingtian dojo and entered it twice?" Lu Ping smiled and took out the grayish clay pot mystic treasure. Then, he told the seniors about how he found the Yingtian dojo. Lu Ping smiled bitterly and helplessly as he looked at the gazes the seniors were giving him. Then, he said, "Martial uncles and martial uncles, this is what it looks like. In the entire Yingtian dojo, the areas covered by the seals are distributed in a concentric circle pattern. The outermost area is covered by 3 7-colored seals, while the rest is covered by 2 5-colored seals." It was only then that the crowd regained their senses from Lu Ping's narration. Then, they looked at enlightened Master Xianchen, Zhenling sect's only grandmaster in array formations. Other than Lu Ping, no one else was more qualified to speak than her. Spiritual Master Xianchen pondered for a moment, and said, "I heard that you fought to a draw with Blue Sea Sect's Zhang Shi outside of Frost Island?" Lu Ping scratched his head. Although he didn't know why Spiritual Master Xianchen would ask about Frost Island, he still answered, "That time, this disciple borrowed the profound ice formation that martial uncle laid down." Spiritual Master Xianchen did not seem satisfied with Lu Ping's answer and continued to ask, "If you had a fair fight with him, what would the outcome be?" Lu Ping saw that Spiritual Master Xianchen was asking in detail, as if the importance of this matter was no less than breaking the rainbow restrictions in Yingtian dojo. Lu Ping pondered for a moment and said carefully, "If that Zhang Shi did not hide too much of his strength that day, disciple is confident that even if I was not his match, I would still be able to tangle with him. At the very least, it would not be a problem for me to escape unscathed." Lu Ping naturally held back when he said this. Among his trump cards, at least the 7 Thunder Treasures Calabash and the Great Gentian Formation had not been exposed. Moreover, during these days, Lu Ping had obtained 3 spirit-nurturing grade artifacts and his strength had increased. If he fought with Zhang Xi again, the outcome was still uncertain. Even so, when everyone heard Lu Ping personally confirm it, their faces showed more or less surprise. Zhang Xi was an expert who had condensed a gold core, while Lu Ping was only a third-generation disciple who had just advanced to the late core forging stage. After a flash of surprise passed through Spiritual Master Xian Chen's face, he began to calm down, as if he was calculating something. The surrounding spiritual masters, including Jiang Tianlin and Laozu, did not make a sound to disturb him. This time, although Jinling was led by Jiang Tianlin, there was no doubt that the commander would be Spiritual Master Xian Qin, the Formation Grandmaster. Unfortunately, Jinling also had an expert who was famous for breaking restrictions, Spiritual Master Liang Xianfeng. He was currently in seclusion and was at the most critical moment of breaking through to the transcendent stage. Otherwise, Jinling's lineup in Yingtian Dojo would be even stronger. After about the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Spiritual Master Xianqin finally let out a long sigh of relief. Beside him, Jiang Tianlin and Laozi said with a smile, "Junior sister, you have a result. This time, what strategy should we adopt to gain the upper hand in the competition with Laozi?" Spiritual Master Xianqin nodded at Jiang Tianlin and Laozi, but he did not answer first. Instead, he turned to Lu Ping and asked again, "Do you know why I did not lead you into the formation immediately?" Lu Ping thought to himself that it was indeed Spiritual Master Xian Chen's idea to stop him outside the formation. However, he still replied with a bitter smile, "It seems that Uncle Master wanted to test me. However, I have disappointed Uncle Master. Uncle Master's formation is mysterious, and I cannot break it." Spiritual Master Xianqin nodded. Just as he was about to say something, Spiritual Master Xianqin said, "Let me explain." Lu Ping looked at Spiritual Master Xianqin with some surprise, only to see that Spiritual Master Xianqin had a regretful expression on his face. He said, "Martial Nephew Lu is now the 3rd Alchemy Grandmaster of our sect. I believe that you have already seen that I, Uncle Master Lu, am seriously injured. I am afraid that I can only use 20 to 30% of my strength. I am no longer able to participate in the Yingtian Dojo. Previously, I was still feeling a little regretful that there was one less person participating in the opening of the Yingtian Dojo. Now that Martial Nephew Lu has arrived, and with Martial Nephew Lu's strength, which is originally above mine, I believe that our sect will gain more from the Yingtian Dojo." Just as Lu Ping was about to speak, he saw that Spiritual Master Xianqin had a regretful expression on his face. However, he still took out a jade box from the storage magic tool on his waist and passed it to Jiang Tianlin Laozi. He said, "From what Martial Nephew Lu said, every restriction in the Yingtian Dojo is at least 7-colored. In that case, only restriction-breaking talismans of 3 colors and above will have some effect on the restriction-breaking talismans. In this box are the restriction-breaking talismans of 3 colors and above that Master and I created. Among them, there are 6 3-colored talismans, 3 4-colored talismans, and only 2 5-colored talismans made by Master. Senior Brother Jiang, please use them carefully and bring back the greatest harvests for our sect." Jiang Tianlin Laozi sighed inwardly. He took the jade box from Spiritual Master Xianqin's hands and said, "Junior sister, please be at ease." Spiritual Master Xianqin was the #1 talisman crafting genius in Jinling. Currently, he was second only to Tian Shui Laozu in Jinling. This was also the main reason why Spiritual Master Xianqin was able to become Tian Shui Laozu's disciple and become the Vice Pavilion Master of the Talisman Crafting Pavilion. Otherwise, with Spiritual Master Xianqin's ordinary talent, without Tian Shui Laozu's care, her cultivation would at most stop at the middle stage of the core forging realm. How could she have reached the 8th layer of the core forging realm? She even wanted to take a peek at the Transcendence realm. Originally, Tian Shui Laozu had helped Spiritual Master Xianqin obtain a spot to participate in the opening of the Yingtian Dojo. She hoped that Spiritual Master Xianqin would be able to find some opportunities in the dojo. However, no matter how much she thought about it, she never expected that spiritual master Xianqin would be heavily injured after arriving in Middle-earth. In order to not affect the competition between Jinling and the other sects, she could only hand over the opportunity to Lu Ping. At this moment, Lu Ping finally found an opportunity to ask, "How did Martial Uncle Xianqin get injured? Did he consume a healing pill? Is there any way this disciple can help?" Spiritual Master Xianqin laughed bitterly. "Although I've heard that the situation in Middle-earth's cultivation world isn't good, I always thought that Middle-earth's cultivation world is the holy land of the entire cultivation world. Once those large and powerful sects make a move, the situation would definitely be under control. However, I never expected that the situation in Middle-earth would deteriorate to such an extent. Not only did the Azura race and demonic cultivator race appear at the same time, from the looks of it, the two races seem to have joined hands to attack a large sect like Blue Space Sect." "What?" Lu Ping's expression changed. Over the years, as his status in the cultivation world rose, he learned more and more about some of the secrets of the cultivation world. Lu Ping had seen the Azura race several times and had even fought against them. Although Lu Ping had never seen the demonic cultivators, he had heard from Tianqin Laozu that demonic cultivators had already appeared in Carefree Sect's fallen archipelago in the East Sea. However, Lu Ping could never have imagined that in Middle-earth, a holy land of cultivation where famous sects and clans gathered, the Azura race and demonic cultivator race had already become arrogant enough to attack a large sect. Large sects were places that the entire North Sea's cultivation world looked up to. It could be seen that the situation in Middle-earth was far more serious than what Lu Ping had heard from the East Sea. Once this great calamity affected the North Sea's cultivation world, Lu Ping could no longer imagine how Jinling would be able to withstand it. The Azura race and the demonic cultivator race were the two most mysterious races in the cultivation world. They were also the races that caused the entire cultivation world to pale at the mention of them. The Azura race would always appear in every great calamity in the cultivation world, but the demonic cultivator race did not appear very frequently. However, once the demonic cultivator race appeared in a great calamity, the cultivation world would often suffer double the losses. The origin and appearance of these two races had always been a mystery. They always appeared abruptly without any pattern, and every time they appeared, it would set off a bloodbath that affected the entire cultivation world. Every time they appeared, it would also lead to a change in the overall situation of the cultivation world. Therefore, every time these two races appeared, the entire cultivation world would call it a great calamity. Although the arrival of each great calamity in the cultivation world did not follow any pattern, it basically maintained an interval of more than 1,000 years. This was also the reason why the oldest of the first generation of Jinling practitioners, Celestial Laozu, only had a lifespan of more than 900 years. Lu Ping had long suspected this, because Dharma adepts had at least a lifespan of 800 years. After advancing to the mid-Dharma stage, a practitioner's lifespan could even extend up to 1,200 years, and late Dharma adepts could even reach 1,500 years. Jinling had a legacy of tens of thousands of years. Although it had not grown into a large sect in the past, the legacy of Dharma adepts had never been cut off. So why was it that there was no Dharma adept of the earlier generation above Celestial Laozu? Laozu was still alive. Originally, Lu Ping suspected that the Dharma adepts of Jinling, who were even older than the first generation of practitioners, might be living in seclusion somewhere. However, as Lu Ping's cultivation and status increased, he also knew more about Jinling's secrets. He also knew that there were indeed no older practitioners above Celestial Laozu. After that, Lu Ping had asked his teacher, Lu Tianling, about this question. Only then did he know that there were 6 Dharma adepts in the previous generation of practitioners, including Celestial Laozu, and 2 of them were mid-Dharma adepts. It was just that later on, when the great calamity of the cultivation world spread to the North Sea, those 6 Laozu protected Jinling against the attack of the Shura clan. 4 Laozu died in battle, and the remaining two Laozu's lifespan was also greatly reduced after the calamity. Jinling's legacy was at its most dangerous moment. Fortunately, at that time, the calamity had just ended, and the various sects in the North Sea had suffered heavy losses. Everyone was licking their wounds and recuperating, so Jinling managed to get through this most difficult period. After barely managing to cultivate 4 Dharma adepts, namely Tian Xiang, Tian Shui, Tian Fan, and Tian Kong, these 2 older generation Jinling Laozus fell one after another, and Jinling finally achieved the Dharma adept's legacy. After that, the 2 Laozus, Tian Jiang and Tian Xiang, also advanced to the Dharma stage. Jinling's strength also recovered to the strength before the calamity, but Xianling's sect was not able to recover as quickly as Jinling after the calamity, and gradually, the gap between them and Jinling was shortened. Although Lu Ping had fought with the Azura clan and killed many Azuras, he knew that the Azuras he met were only the weakest of the Azura clan. They were minor repairs Azuras that had not yet fully matured. A fully matured Azura would have the strength of a late core forging cultivator, and the great Azuras of the Azura clan were all existences that could rival Dharma adepts. Looking at Lu Ping's shocked expression, Jiang Tianlin Laozu explained, Tsengyu sect is the destination of the East Sea's Purple Talisman Pavilion's ultra-long-distance teleporter. This time, it was directly attacked by the Azura clan and the Xioma clan. Although they were repelled, Tsengyu sect suffered heavy losses this time. At that time, we had just teleported to Tsengyu sect when we saw the battle between the 2 sides. We had no choice but to help Tsengyu sect. Your uncle Xianju was ambushed by an Azura at that time and was severely injured. Lu Ping's expression was solemn as he nodded and said, Uncle Xianju, have you taken any healing elixirs? Xianju Jinren smiled bitterly and said, I've already taken the Bell Cauldron pill refined by Master Fornax. This time, Master Fornax prepared a Bell Cauldron pill for each of us just in case. I didn't expect that I would waste this healing pill before even entering Yingtian Dojo. The Zhongding pill was a healing elixir that Tianlin Laozu had relied on to become a Grandmaster alchemist. Although the difficulty of refining this elixir was only at the level of a half-step Dharma adept, its effects were even effective on Dharma adepts. The only downside was that the spirit herbs needed to refine this elixir were extremely precious, even more precious than the spirit herbs needed to refine normal Dharma adepts. At this time, Jiang Tianlin Laozu said, Your uncle Xianju's injuries were quite serious. At that time, it was life-threatening. Although she used a Zhongding pill to alleviate her injuries, I'm afraid that she will need several years to recover. We originally wanted to give our Zhongding pills to her, but she thought that this trip to the central region was fraught with danger, so she refused to take our Zhongding pills. Just as Xuanju Daoist master was about to say something, Ancestor Jiang Tianlin raised his hand and stopped him. But this time, there's always a way out. I didn't expect you to be one step ahead of us. With an alchemy grandmaster like you here, I think your uncle Xuanju Daoist master won't have to worry about our Bell Cauldron pill. I heard from your uncle Liang Xianfeng that you were able to refine the Bell Cauldron pill when you were just at the early stage of the core forging realm. Jiang Tianlin Laozu's words were said to Lu Ping, but in fact, it was also said to Xianju Jinren. At this time, Xianju Jinren said, Although Nephew Lu has become an alchemist grandmaster, the spirit herbs used to refine a Zhongding pill are too precious. Nephew Lu may not have all the precious spirit herbs needed to refine the Zhongding pill. After taking a Zhongding pill, my life is no longer in danger. All I need is a few more years to recuperate. Senior brothers and junior sisters, you should keep the Zhongding pills for yourself in case you need them. Moreover, this time, I was seriously injured. My cultivation foundation has been shaken, and there is almost no hope of advancing to the Dharma stage. What's the difference between recovering 2 years later and earlier? At this time, Lu Ping had basically understood the cause of the matter. The biggest reason why Xianju Jinren refused to take the Zhongding pill was because he had no hope of advancing to the Dharma stage. Lu Ping thought about it and took out an ancient book from his storage ring. This ancient book was made of the same material as the previous 3 complete ancient books, but there were many missing parts in this ancient book. It was obviously incomplete. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Lu Ping handed the incomplete ancient book to Xian Zhuzhenren, who had a suspicious look on his face. He said, "Uncle, take a look at this ancient book first." Xian Zhuzhenren did not know what Lu Ping was up to, so he opened the incomplete ancient book in his hand and began to browse. When Taoist Xian Zhu flipped to the first page of the remnant book, he was stunned for a moment before his expression turned serious. However, as he flipped through the remnant book, his expression first became one of exuberance, then ecstasy. Soon after, his expression became solemn. It was obvious that he was deeply attracted by the contents of the remnant book. After a long time, Xian Zhuzhenren flipped to the last page of the incomplete ancient book. Then, as if remembering something, he raised his head and looked at Lu Ping, who had a relaxed smile on his face. Then, he smiled apologetically at the others and said, "To me, this incomplete ancient book is 100 times more precious than the 3 complete cultivation methods." Seeing the puzzled expressions on everyone's faces, Xian Zhuzhenren asked Lu Ping, "This ancient book is also from the Yingtian dojo?" Lu Ping nodded solemnly and said, "Uncle, this ancient book is not complete. I think there are other parts in the dojo. If you can collect them all, even if your cultivation foundation is damaged, there is still hope for you to advance to the Dharma stage." Xian Zhuzhenren touched the incomplete ancient book in his hand and said with emotion, "I don't just need the other parts. Just this half of the incomplete ancient book can make up for a huge flaw in my cultivation." Xian Zhuzhenren asked curiously, "Senior sister, what kind of ancient book is it that you value it so much?" Xian Zhuzhenren nodded at Lu Ping, then handed the ancient book in his hand to Jiang Tianlin Laozu, who was beside him, and said, "This half of the ancient book is related to the creation and cultivation of talismans in the Yingtian dojo sect. I am a talisman cultivator like the Purple Talisman Pavilion, but my sect's inheritance is not complete. Furthermore, I don't have teacher Tian Shui's talent to make up for the flaws in my cultivation method. Originally, there was not much hope for me to advance to the Dharma stage. However, this half of the ancient book can help me make up for many of the flaws in my cultivation. It will be very beneficial for my future cultivation." Seeing everyone's joyful faces, Xian Zhuzhenren finally smiled. She continued, "However, this is not the only important thing. In this half of the ancient book, there is a complete inheritance of a type of precious talisman. This inheritance may not be complete even in some large sections." This time, it was Xian Zhuzhenren who could not hold back his curiosity. He hurriedly asked, "What inheritance is it?" Before Xian Zhuzhenren could speak, Jiang Tianlin, who was flipping through the half of the ancient book, gasped and said, "It is actually the complete inheritance of the 7-colored restriction-breaking talisman." Xian Zhuzhenren opened his mouth wide and said, "What? Restriction-breaking talisman? Or the 7-colored restriction-breaking talisman?" Jiang Tianlin Laozu closed the ancient book in his hand and said to Lu Ping, "I want to bring this half of the original ancient book along with the 3 complete cultivation books back to the sect. If you need it, you can make a copy of it first." Lu Ping smiled and said, "Disciple originally wanted to hand these ancient books over to the sect. I have already made a copy of it." Jiang Tianlin Laozu was obviously satisfied with Lu Ping's attitude. He said, "Martial nephew Lu, this is only a small harvest from the Yingtian dojo. It seems that the harvest from the Yingtian dojo this time is really worth looking forward to." Everyone smiled and nodded. Lu Ping could see the hidden excitement in their eyes. Jiang Tianlin Laozu handed a jade bottle to Xian Zhuzhenren and said, "Junior martial sister, you won't reject this bell cauldron pill this time, right?" Xian Zhuzhenren was still hesitating when Lu Ping said, "Martial uncle, with your current injuries, it is best for you to take another bell cauldron pill. Not only will it greatly shorten the recovery time, but it will also minimize the possibility of your injuries affecting your cultivation foundation. As for the bell cauldron pill, you don't have to worry. Disciple has collected a lot of spiritual herbs and can start refining them immediately. Moreover, Disciple has another matter to report. It is about a huge spiritual herb garden in a secret realm of the Yingtian sect. However, this time, only Marshal Uncle Jiang can do it. Xian Zhuzhenren's eyes lit up when he heard Lu Ping's words. Jiang Tianlin Laozu had already handed over the Bell Cauldron pill to Lu Ping. Then, he smiled and asked, "Oh, there is a secret realm of the Yingtian sect in the Yingtian mountain range? Do I have to do it? Tell me, what kind of good news have you brought us?" You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.